This is the very beginning of the stream. This is the start of the stream. Tell or ask me anything in the chat. Parasocial says stream starting in 4 minutes. That's what I said 4 minutes ago. Tell or ask me anything in the chat. Joseph Barreras says hey. Hello, Joseph. The Real says hi. Hello, The Real. X says hi. Hello, the great question asker. Random says hey. Hello, Random. The Real says remember me. I do, yeah. Random says hey. Hello again. Juan says hi, Don. Hello, Juan. Squilliam says day 37 of asking Don how's life. Great as usual. Coldslayer says hey yo. Hello, Coldslayer. Arctic says yo Don, I'm listening from work. Cool, I wonder what you do. Unknown says hi. Hello, Unknown. Spunky Gooner super chatted 10 American dollars. Thank you, Spunky. Spunky says I'm number one. I mean, yeah, you're the first super chatter of the stream. Thank you, I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate this like $10 every stream thing you do. Let me extend the timer. Extended, there we go. Ali says, hi Don, hope you had a good day. Yeah, today was great. Thank you, Spunky. You are now moderator. As you usually are. Jobber says, Guten Tag, good day. Coldslayer says, did you bring Coke? I did not. Arctic says, I drive for a living. Okay, so you're a trucker? Enoch says, I feel like you wear the same shirt every stream. I mean, I kind of do. Spunky says, why did the time start at 30? Man, how things change. Well, it costs $30 from, like, the goal was $30 last stream, and every dollar is a minute, so it seems fitting, like 30 minutes for $30. Jobber says, do you think censorship is necessary at times? Yes. Kevin says, you like jazz? I do. X says, how can you take 2 away from 5 and have 4 left? I don't know. Night Slayer says, I'm early. Hello, Night Slayer. Unknown says, how did the chats pop up? Live chat overlay. Coldslayer says, do you pay to stream? No, all of my, my software is mostly free. X says, remove the letters F and E and you are left with IV. Oh yeah, that's smart. Survivor says, do you like to be burnt? If not, you better surrender to Jesus. I don't think I'll get burnt. I don't think I'll go to hell. Kevin says, do you remember me? Yes, you're notorious. Sunrise says, what flavor of poo is your favorite? I don't have one. Night Slayer says, what's the drink for today, sir? Just a plastic bottle of water. Jazz says, hi. Hello, Jazz. Kitty says, hi. Hello, Kitty. Jobber says, what do you think happens after we die? I think that's impossible to fathom. Like, our brains can't, like, think about that. I don't think it's as simple as, like, just black. I think it's just unfathomable. Y says, do you like balls? Not testicles, no. Softball says, what sport is your favorite? Basketball. Sunrise says, do you like femboys? I'm not one. I don't have any friends that are, so. HK says, this is bullshit. I hate this stream. How do these racial slurs actually watch this? No comment. Sienna says, are you gay? I am not gay. Mason says, remember me? Nope. X says, how do you put an elephant in the fridge? I don't know. Joseph says, with their eyes. Kevin says, I only said that to prove my friend wrong, cause I'm always right. Okay. Cold Slayer says, rise above haters. Okay. Jess says, would you be gay for $500? No. Ella says, do you watch MHA or Demon Slayer? Neither. Clay says, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be their name. Okay. Dominic says, do you drag race in GTA 5? Theo says, don't listen to these people, please don't suicide. There were no plans for that. Jobber says, got any questions to ask me? What do you think about censorship? Is freedom of speech a bad thing? Duck says, bye, I have to go to sleep. Bye, Duck. David says, hope you get more support soon. Or not, I'm fine with not getting more support. Kayla says, do you play football? I don't. Anna says, hi, I'm new. Hello, Anna. HS says, yeah, I agree, this is dumb. Can you recommend a good creator for people to watch instead? Jess says, have you fingered your anal opening? No. Carson says, do you play Geometry Dash sometimes? Yes. Jane says, hi, hello, Jane. Turtle says, who's your favorite YouTuber? I like the Phone Losers of America. X says, open the refrigerator door, put the elephant inside, close the door. Okay, I already forgot the joke. HS says, go watch N-Man Gaming or something. That's a pretty deep cut. I wonder if you're N-Man Gaming himself. I Love Planes says, what's your favorite car? The Zentorno. Stranger says, do you watch Stranger Things? I don't. I Love Planes says, nice. Okay. N says, is 2016 better than 2026 or not? I prefer this year. Anna says a bunch of text art. Okay. Spunky says, my name is Dom Benitez, and I extremely dislike Guy. Okay. Identical says, yay, Goat is back. Okay. Gon says, hello, Donovan. Hello, Gon. Asayake says, free speech does lead to the paradox of tolerance. Also, hi, hope you are well. Paradox of tolerance. I don't know what that is, but that sounds interesting. HS says, do you really think I'm him? Yeah. NS says, I'm Nuss, but you can call me Nuss12. Okay. Sunrise says, would you poo in a pie and eat it with a furry for 1 quadrillion? No, thank you. Internet says, can you stand up and fart into the mic? No. Carson says, please tell me, do you play Bloom's Tower Defense? I have played that, yeah. Jess says, how many holes do you have and which one is your favorite? I'm distracted. Westru super chatted 5 American dollars. Thank you, Westru. Westru says, not giving up on you, man. I was glad to hear that you read the Bible. Romans 10:9, Jesus loves you. Thank you. I remember, confess you believe in Jesus. That's Romans 10:9, thank you. I don't believe in it though, but thank you. I appreciate your super chat. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Westru, thank you. Jobber says, I think it depends on the situation, but for sure, censorship with history is a bad thing. Generally a bad thing, okay. Squish says, how are you? I'm good. Asayake says, I mean, technically, we're all donuts. We have one hole in the donut sense of the word. I don't get it. JJ says, hey twin, do you remember me? I don't remember you. Survivor says, how could you not believe in your creator? Because it's not obvious to me that he's real. Cold Slayer says, do you think you have an ancestor that looks exactly like you? Yes. Bunny says, would he be gay for $1 million? No. Jess says, if the only way to save world was for you to be gay, what would you do? I'll cross that bridge if and when I get there. Jobber says, I have no comment about the donut comment. Laughing my ass off. Okay, Asayake says, think about it. I would if like it was a one-on-one conversation between you and me, but I kind of like being, fast-paced. HS says, so if you believe in historical events like the Civil War, why don't you believe in the historical event of Jesus Christ being crucified? I mean, let's say I believe in him being crucified. That doesn't mean that Jesus is divine. Jess says, if you were the donut, would the hole be your asshole? No comment. Liz says, hello Don, how has Thursday been treating you? Great, thank you. Identical says, is Don your full name or just a short? I could answer that, but I like my privacy. X says, a woman lives on the 30th floor of a building every day. That's a really long story. Blasty says, would you say Harris Z for $1 million? Yes. Survivor says, Jesus Christ is King, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Okay. Lick says, hi Ron, I got here. Whoops, it autocorrected. I'm not Ron. Liz says, how long have you been on? For 12 minutes. Jobber says, have you ever had a family member that fought in World War II? No, not immediate. Ol says, do you think World War III will happen? No. Cold Slayer says, I think his full name is Donathan, but I could be wrong. Okay. Liam says, fuck. Okay. Play says, bro, why do you skip what I write? Because you're not special. X says, would you rather be stuck in a house with someone you hate or someone who hates you? Someone I hate. Code says, hey, you look like Hamilton M. husband. Okay. Jess says, have you ever shaved your ass? No comment. Cap says, Don is the W. Thank you. Purple says, I'm Guy's friend. Okay. Softball says, what's your favorite basketball team? The Lakers. Bunny says, everyone spam nuggets if you love nuggets. Okay. Cap says, W Don. Thank you. Blasty says, have you watched The Walking Dead? I have. I like the hallucinations Rick has of his dead wife. Azad says, why you look mad? I don't know. Jobber says, you spam. Okay. Jess says, have you told anyone that you are gay? Yes or no? No. Hair says, call me H-spam, I love this guy. Okay. G says, hi, do you play Rivals? It just looks like a Overwatch ripoff. So no. Bunny says, have you ever shaved your mom? What? Adam says, hi Don, I'm back. Can I be a model? What? Wolf says, hi, hello Wolf. Identical says, that's kind of nice to see people from your other streams. Yeah, X is a regular, yeah. Adam says, hi Don, I'm back. Can I be a model? Type better. Shagod super chatted $2 American. Thank you, Shagods. I appreciate it. Let me extend the timer on your behalf. Timer extended. Thank you. Cap says, whoa. Okay. X says, if you were given 3 wishes, what would you wish for? Maybe a Toyota Corolla. Cyber says, what up, Donnie? Hello, Cyber. Wolf says, hi. Hello, Wolf. Cat says, do you play Roblox? No. Morocco says, would you be Muslim if I give you $1 quadrillion? Sure. PW says, welcome to Gboard Clipboard. Any text that you copy, I don't need those instructions. Jess says, is it true that Trump is from Kurdistan? I don't think so. Spunky super chatted $2 American. Thank you. Spunky says, my name is Don Benitez. Spunky Gooner is my favorite. I was reading a message, just to be clear there. That didn't come from me. Thank you, Spunky Gooner. I appreciate it. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. You are one of my favorites, though. You. Board says, are you gay? I'm hetero. Identical says, would you drink for a year for $1 million? Yes. Blake G super chatted $2. Thank you, Blake. I appreciate it. Let me extend the timer on your behalf, Blake. 2 minutes added because of you. Axel says you should brush your teeth because they're yellow. That doesn't help. Lay says, can I sub or is that offensive? You can not sub. I'm okay with that. G says, oh, okay. Spunky says, it will seem like it came from you in an edit whenever I get to it, Sir Don. I see. I wonder what that's gonna be like. Jobbers says, let me know if you have any more questions for me. What on earth does your name mean? The king of jobbers, the kid? What? Cop says, am I Mexican? Yes, that's my guess. Marrow says, is your actual name Don? Maybe. Jess says, if your dick was so long that it could reach your anal opening, would you? I wouldn't do that. Anna says, hey Don, you're the best and kind YouTuber. No, I'm not, but thank you. Vip says, can you read this? Would you want 10 billion friends or $10 billion friends? Baked says, my brother came out as trans. Okay. Crab says, what's the background music? Just a song by Marcus Persson. Cold Slayer says, ever get in India? Burn on your arm? I don't know what that is. S. Brandy says, wait, are you an atheist? I'm not religious, so I guess so. Harge says, bro, what up? Hello, Harge. 3 says, hi, in love your vids. Thank you. Board says, Israel after all he does to Palestine. What? Big Guy says, would you be blah, blah, blah? I don't. Can you ask interesting stuff and not? X says, you stand before 2 doors, heaven and hell, guarded by 2 people. Can you ask something shorter? Epic says, please mod. No. Anna says, would you rather have a cat or have a dog puppy? I would want a cat. Luke says, that's a classic riddle. I don't know. Board says, do you support Israel? No comment. Purple says, does it jiggle when you fart? No comment. Bunny says, ah, okay. Miguel says, yo, what's up? Hello, Miguel. Noel says, hugs and kisses. Thank you. Jess says, I would suck my dick to sleep if I had. Okay. Liz says, I kind of feel bad as a regular because I don't talk to anyone but you, Don. So I don't really know anyone here. That's fine. Lucas says, magical, laughing my ass off. Okay. Water says, ayo. Okay. Anna says, do you like Messi or Ronaldo better? I don't care. Mason says, you were rude last night. Okay. 04 says, time for our tradition. Did you just shit my pants? No. Cold Slayer says, are you slowing down on coke? Yeah, but unintentionally. Tracy says, 1 pound or 2 pounds? 2 pounds. Harge says, yo, was you the best? What? Jess says, ask me something, handsome. What do you think of Islam? Kevin says, never mind. Purple is not my friend after he said that. Okay. Noel says, I'm going to go ahead with it. I have no problem. What are you saying? Gon says, invisibility or read minds. Read minds. Cop says, we're all Mexican now. Okay. Adam says, hi Don, I'm back. Hello, Adam. PCE says, I have a big dick and cum. Okay. Jess says, I think Islam is nice. You can have many wives. Sexy, right? No comment. Adam says, can I be a model? Spell it correctly and maybe I'll consider it. Purple says, keep talking, daddy. I'm almost done. Okay. Raheem says, hi, I'm back. Hello, Raheem. Cold Slayer says, do you like uncooked noodles? I don't. Miguel says, what you think of Islam? I wanna read it. It sounds interesting. I don't know too much about it. Cop says, Islam is too patriarchal, but at least they're serious. Okay. Board says, good boy for answer. Okay. Jobbers says, I was called the king of jobbers because I sucked at PvP games as the kid part. I was inspired by the wrestler. The kid. Okay. I don't get how sucking at PvP games relates to that name. Headset says, yo, what's up? Hello, Headset. H says, you've been smiling a lot today. You ate eggs and bacon or something? I ate a sandwich today, but it wasn't that great, so that's not responsible for my smiling. S. Brandy says, talk on my command. Here I am doing it. Angel says, what is your biggest fear? Car crashes, definitely. Jobber says, cause jobber means someone who loses a lot. Okay, did not know that. Xander says, okay. Roya says, you're depressed, I just can't prove it. Okay. Kira says, Islam is the religion that truly shapes the community to the best possible. Interesting. Arthur says it's John Marston Micah. Okay. Sebastian says, do you like Chinese food with spicy flavoring? No. Adam says, hi Don, I'm back. Can I be a model? It's mod, not model. Cop says, I've been in a car crash. I died, but not in this dimension. Okay. MF says, kidney stone, gallstone, testicular torsion, which is worst? I imagine the testicular. Jen says, Dom or sub? No comment. Miguel says, I respect it, Don, my brother. Okay. H says, do you live in North America? Yeah. Jess says, do you have a tight anal opening? No comment. Otter says, remember me? Nope. Cop says, kidney stone pain can make you throw up. Okay. Board says, I want kidnap you to Islam. Okay. Callie says, hello. Hello, Callie. Jeff says, what is going on in this messed up room? Okay. Sienna says, you're the best YouTuber ever. I'm not. Guy says, do the RAR. No. Jen says, Don, this is a serious question. Just get to the point. JK says someone farted real loud in the office and no one wants to fess up. Okay. Headset says, yo bro, hello headset. Jess says, have you seen Impractical Jokers? I've seen Ross Creations. Millie says, huh? What? Braylon says, the music is scary, but the comments are scarier. True. Kat says, you like diner? I don't go out to eat that often. Dalmatian says, hog reveal? No. Cop says, if dinosaurs aren't real, then what's this bone Eddie Murphy put in my butt? No comment. H says, this man's sad. Huh? What? Yeah. Sienna says, you don't even have videos. Ha ha ha. True. Philly says, Labubu. Okay. Liz says, can you agree that McDonald's has the best Coke? I haven't noticed. Jess says, can you finger my anal opening? I don't want to. Lee says, you should believe in God. Okay. Laurel says, Don, you are a cool person. Thank you. Soy says, what sport would you recommend playing if my mom is forcing? Not football. Dalmatian says, who the fuck said, do you fuck with emo music? Don't know. The Wind says, hey, it's the same Wind from last night, and yeah, I remember you from the comment section. Yeah, that was weird how I spotted you out in the wild on a random video. Professor says, do it be sagging? No comment. Gon says, I've had testicular torsion before. Was it painful? Like worse than kidney stones? Kevin says, can we ban purple out of the stream, please? No. X says, if every person carries an invisible crown representing their hidden strength, what do you think yours is made of? Cords and wires? Dalmatian says, bro, stop saying twiggle my anal opening. Okay. Cyber says, this chat is cooked. Okay. Cold Slayer says, do you think the huck to a girl will forever be forgotten? Yes. Hug says, say this if you're gay. Your comment doesn't hold that power. H says, who the fuck said, do you fuck with emo music? I don't know. The Wind says, how do you feel about these comments? You look like you don't even care. I care about these comments. Spunky says, how much to ban Guy again? I don't want to do that deal anymore. Sorry. Purple says, is your tip pink, white, or black? No comment. Ali says, do you remember me? No. Jay says, bro, what is going on with this chat? I like uncensored chat. Quacker says, do you think 67 will ever be forgotten about? Yes. Cop says, it's all pink inside. Okay. H says, you're implying that you've banned people for money before? Yes, but only for 10 minutes. Well, actually, I think I've done it for a day, 24 hours once, but it's not a deal anymore. The Wind says, these comments are wild. Yeah. Cyber says, this guy looks unfazed by these comments. Why are you capitalizing everything? Official says, yo, do you remember me? Yeah. Ad says, someone farted in my exam and it got cancelled. Okay. Caden says, what? Okay. Gon says, the torsion was very painful. Okay. What is that caused by? Dawn says, what was the worst injury you've gotten? I fell backwards on my head. Mia says, who do you think your first subscriber was? One of them was Crystal Moth. Dalmatian says, who's the most annoying person here? The guy talking about anal cavities. H says, this dude isn't annoyed when people ask him if he's gay 400,000 times, but is annoyed when someone capitalizes the first letter of each word. Pretty weird. FX says, She said she was 7. No comment. Soy says, can you give me one tip of advice to have mega aura and be really tough like you? Be dead inside. Cop says, I could be more annoying if you need me to. Don't do that. Spunky says, can you at least condemn Guy once for me and my daily 10 donations? I mean, if he says something racist, I'll condemn him, but not because you ask. Synth says, which is worse? Are you gay or there's someone behind you? There's someone behind you because it's longer to read. Gon says, torsion can happen randomly to any man. Huh, wow. FX says, why is my brother humping me? No comment. Cop says, my dog machine ate your karma. Okay. SP says, community did. Okay. The Wind says, my dog killed a chicken. Okay. Cyber says, so it stands out more. I see what you're doing. It's annoying, though. Rival says, can you ban me for 5 minutes? No. Adian says, my brother got mauled by a dog when he was 2. Sorry. Maple says, racial slur. Okay. Jess says, what is your problem with anal opening? It's vulgar. Kevin says, me and my bud would never say something racist. Okay. Rack says, do you have a tight butthole? No comment. Cop says, what? Was it a pit bull? They're really good at mauling. Maybe. Soy says, how happy would you be 99 to 199 if I donated you to the max amount? I would be extremely happy. Spunky says, well, I condemn Guy, and that response, Sir Don. Okay, I don't care. Dalmatian says, they're thinking that anal sex is funny. It's not, bro. Okay. X says, if thoughts could accidentally change reality, what would be the first strange thing that appears? I'm not too sure. Judden says, you're heartless. Okay. Dalmatian says, what the fuck is this chat? Okay. Miguel says, I know you want to laugh. No, I don't. Say says, is the timer for how long the stream is? Yeah. Spunky says, I don't care either. Wanna brain wrestle? Sure, I don't know what that means, but Cold Slayer says, what's your favorite trend? I remember kind of enjoying the Tide Pod thing. FX says, the people capitalizing words are so annoying. Okay. Cyber says, is it better if I type like this? Yeah. King says, what is your favorite YouTuber? Sal C1. Mello says, I farted. Okay. Adian says, Chrome, colon, / dino. Okay. Dalmatian says, okay is your favorite word. Yeah. Anima says, are you currently a fugitive from the law? I'm not. Susan says, my favorite trend is I want to run away. Okay. Harriet says, if you had 1 million cash, what would you buy first? A Toyota Corolla, maybe. Giyu says, Don, I'm back. Okay. Spunky says, how many Tide Pods did you eat? I didn't participate, I just found it funny. The Wind says, do you like chicken? Yes. Ron says, did you watch El Camino? Yeah, I didn't like it. Andrew says, Don has in fact stayed legendary. Okay. Spatula says, I am a spatula, what are we making today? Scrambled eggs. Cop says, what's the funniest conspiracy theory? Operation Bluebeam. King says, how long would you keep sucking my dingling without stopping? No comment. Soy says, what should I change my name to in real life? A first name with 1 syllable. Spunky says, looking like a short stream today, Don. None of these gray names want to pay for your time. Maybe. By the way, I end the stream when the timer ends, but I increase the timer with super chats. AN1 says, funniest conspiracy theory, the British royal family are lizards. Yeah, that's pretty funny. It's 5 says, guys, this is fake, he never answers anyone. I do answer. Cold Slayer says, OS Cappy. Okay. Mello says, I'm gonna give you a colonoscopy with hot glue. Okay, I don't want that. Duck says, what is your favorite color? This. Zoe says, hi, hello, Zoe. Aran says, do you remember me? Nope. Tony says, hi, Don, how are you doing? I'm doing great. Thrift says, I want you bad, Donnie. No, thank you. X Turbo says, why did Bush do 9/11? I don't think he did. Luke says, what question do you wish people would ask you on stream, but nobody ever does? Maybe stuff about YouTube pranksters. Spunky says, tell me something new, Don. I was watching the movie Seven Samurai an hour ago. Adian says, I know your exact location. Okay. The Riz says, do you like my drawing? I can't see it. It's too small on my screen, sorry. Z says, have you got a PS4 Pro? Yeah. Corpse says, Don, please tell me, do you know about the Airbus A340? No. Bear says, what's your favorite movie/show? One of them is Rashomon. Thrift says, Iran or Israel? No comment. King says, if you move, you are gay. I don't care. Carter says, what's your favorite NFL team? Seahawks. Cold Slayer says, are you afraid to drink coffee? Yeah. Addy says, what's your favorite song? I like Francis Farmer. Spatula says, what's your favorite thing to cook? One of them is over medium eggs. Enrique says H. Okay. Q says, is it okay that I like to goon to Roblox avatars? No. Sun says, Don, sorry, I'm only here for Laurel C. Okay. Mustafa says, how old are you? An adult. X says, why are you afraid to drink coffee? I'm only a little afraid. I've just heard that it was addictive. And Reality says, have you ever summoned a demon? No. SP says, why am I bricked? I don't know, dude. Robert says 6767. Okay. Duck says, what color is your favorite color? You're boring me. Adian says, I know your exact location. You're in your house. Okay. Dalmatian says, what does bricked mean? An erection. Horsey says, do you like horses? Yeah. X says, I'm addicted to instant coffee. Okay. Tony says, Proverbs 12:22. Lying lips are abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. Okay. Synth says, you've slowly become less and less nonchalant throughout your streams. That's true. ES says, do you have emotions? Yeah. Gon says, drink one sip from a dirty green pool, or swim in it for 10 minutes. Swim. Spunky says, why are there so many racial slurs against Africans in the city? No comment. MF says, what do you think of the 9/11 conspiracy theories? I don't care for them because I want to be an upstanding citizen. Cold Slayer says, someone cooks with his own pee on TikTok. Okay. Horsey says, do you like Demon Slayer? No. Fatima says, something very annoying. Lily says, drink water, you sound stressed. I'll do that soon. Dalmatian says, porn. Okay. Spunky says, have you ever had a war donut cut in half with ice cream in it? Delicious. No, I don't even know what a war donut is. S. Brandy says, hey Don, could you call Spunky Gunner Fine Monkey? He works at our company. No. I Like says, do you play Roblox? No. Ron says, can you suggest one new skill I can work on? Skateboarding. Gon says, you shouldn't have read that guy's donut comment, it's bad. Did I say something bad? I don't get it. Addie says, what is your thought on 67? Mostly annoying. Liz says, my ex-roommate had a testicular torsion. It looked like a purple, swollen grapefruit. I woke up to him screaming. Wow, that's crazy. Spunky says, have you ever had a warm donut cut in half? I have not. That sounds good. Duck says, are you an icon? No. The Wind says, daily reminder to poop. Okay. Kaio says, remember me from yesterday? I don't. Sour says, I gave her boyfriend those huge balls. Okay. Mellow says, I shat in your shampoo bottle. Okay. King says, if you could pick 3 powers, time stop. I don't care. Spunky says 9 minutes and counting peasants. Yeah. I end the stream in this amount of time unless someone super chats. If someone super chats, I increase the timer. I stream for longer. Kara says, what YouTubers do you like? Phone Losers of America. Cold Slayer says, if you had good imagination, just imagine I super chatted 300. I'm not doing that. Ron says, the rich in chat, please donate. Let's see Don more. Esme says, interesting emoji contraption. Okay. I Like says, do you play Roblox? I don't play that stupid game. Burger says, what do you call an angry girl? A nutcracker. Okay. X says, what's a small thing that instantly makes the world feel softer? Background music. Alexa says sex. Okay. Sprink says, what is your favorite animal? I like chimpanzees. Dave M says, where's Big Dick when you need him? Yeah, I don't know. Enrique says, what is your favorite? Favorite what? Kat says, what games do you play? I have played a lot of Rainbow Six Siege. I team killed a lot in that game. Q says, would you rather time stop in school? I'll say this, if I had that ability, I wouldn't rape people. Spunky says cheese and rice. Okay. CD says smile. Not on prompt, that's stupid. Mellow says, I'm going PP in your hand soap. Okay. The Wind says, what if someone keeps donating? I'll just figure it out on your own. Gon says, would you rather live in a desert region or forest region? Forest. She says, are you single, bro? No comment. Prince says, good night, Don. Good night, Prince. Stars says, have you played chess? Yes. Jess says, if you were the president, what would you do? Visit Kim Jong-un. Esme says, why aren't you more popular? I don't know. Sour says, can you say good day like they do on Australia? I don't know how you do that. Kira says, my name is Kira. Why? Okay. I'm back says, if you can have any dog breed. Border Collie. Harv says, how's your day? It's going good, thank you. Spunky says, when the Discord voice chat happening, or do we have to pay for that too? I mean, do you have an interesting reason to do that? Like, Jamie says, hi. Hello, Jamie. Zyke says, what's your favorite game other than video games? Scrabble's pretty fun. By the way, Spunky, like to play a video game, or like, is there like a purpose? I'm back says, would you rather have $1 a second or 1,000 a second? The latter. Q says, what would you do if you had to goon to one character out of any game? Well, it wouldn't be a... Never mind. Ever says, are you a Therian furry? I'm not. Jess says, do you have a favorite animal? I do. X says, what's a random thing that always feels a little magical? Always being on a plane. Sun says, where Laurel C works is a national security secret, so don't ask, damn it. I wasn't gonna ask. Jeff says, this takes no brains to do this. True. The Flippin' Gambler super chatted 20 American dollars. Thank you, the Flippin' Gambler. I greatly appreciate that. Flippin' says, Kate, I missed the last stream. Not sure if I can make it this whole one. Okay, you can't be here for all of this stream. Got it. And I did notice that you weren't there last time. Thank you, Gambler, for your big super chat. I appreciate it. Thank you, man. Random says, would you rather time stop? I don't care. Thank you again, Gambler. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you so much. H says, the Flippin' Gambler, we don't want you here, my friend. I want him here. Spunky says, I want you to hear me condemn you, Sir Don. That sounds pretty boring. Dexo says, Gambler paid for my niece's college tuition. Okay. By the way, Gambler, you are now mod. This is like your 30th time being mod. 13 says, check me out. No. Lucas says he's not gay. True. Spunky says, life is boring, what you gonna do? That's a good point, to be honest. Observer says, what are your PC specs? I have 64 gigabytes of RAM. Luke Groundwalker super chatted 10 euros. Thank you, Luke. Luke says, what's the difference between a pyramid and an orphan? The orphan doesn't have a mummy. Okay. No comment. Thank you, Luke Groundwalker, for your super chat. And yesterday's super chats. I appreciate that as well. Thank you, Luke Groundwalker. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you so much. H says, do you remember the first time the Flippin' Gambler donated to you? I think it was like a month ago. Gon says, what kind of alien looking money is that? Yeah, it looks weird. That's a euro. Big says, bro acts different when they give him money. I do. SP says, I'm an orphan. Okay. 3 says, what's your mom's name? No comment. And by the way, Luke, you are now a moderator. Thank you again, Luke. Spunky says, thank you, Spunky Gunner, for being a semi-OG and donating every fucking stream. That's valid. That might as well have came from me. Will says, my G Don, what's happening? Hello, Will. The SS says, my brother's dead. Burp, I'm about to eat pretzels. Want some? No, thank you. First says, whoa, you really are trying to start streaming during the day. Yeah. Is it the day for you right now? The first captain. H says, yeah, he does act different. At least make it less obvious. Not gonna lie, I mean the gluttony is out of this goddamn world. I don't think it's evil what I'm doing. I don't. Duck says, Don, what is your chess elo? Bet it's under 100. I have no idea. I only have like 10 hours playing chess. Huge says, I saw you bunny hopping on the seatless BMX. Okay. Black says, you finally turned into a squid. Let's go. What? Hockey says, get a haircut. I will. The Wind says, do you feel a little angry when you get a donation because you have to deal with the annoying comments longer? No, I feel completely good. I get a little mad when there's like a train of super chats because I feel bad for ignoring like the regular chatters. H says, Don, 100 elo is the lowest, by the way. That's probably me. Liz says, what's your shortest stream time? Like 30 seconds. Ava says, are you good at math? I am not at all. Luke says, who's the most creative YouTube prankster? Creative? I'd say Ross Creations. First says, yep, it's day for me. Okay, just curious. I'm back says, I'm not 18, but I'm the one who ate your food. Huh. The Riz says, do you remember me? No. Evan says, I have like -10 elo. Okay. Spunky says, Don is baiting us. Everyone super chat now at the same time. Make him happy. Huh. Gon says, Don was a Vitaly fan. No, didn't he fake stuff? I never got into that guy. Stars says, what is your favorite Poppy Playtime character? Sonic. Oh yeah, says, do you hate dicks? Yeah, other dudes, yeah. Ash says, what's your favorite sex position? No comment. Will Smith says, I know this is an unusual time for you, lad. Yeah, I don't usually stream at this time. Jackson says, I am stoned. Okay. The Official says, favorite pop... I just answered that. Cosmic says, if you had to eat one food for the rest of your life, the cheeseburger from In-N-Out. Dexo says, I'm smoking a blunt right now. Okay. Zimmy says, what's 13 times 3? Is that 39? X says, do you think people reveal their real selves more when they're happy or when they're tired? I mean, I think they're both their real self there. The Wind says, how are you so happy but act so unfazed? I don't get it. Pseudo says, greetings from Portugal. Hello, Pseudo. The Official says, I already read that. Jeff says, you are being humiliated. Maybe if this was in person, but you guys are just text messages. Huge says, the rains in Africa, it's gonna take a lot to take me away from you. Okay. Stars says, what's your favorite... I already read that. Ted says, hi. Hello, Ted. Cop says, if they brought back the grilled stuffed burrito, would you get me one? No. Ted says, hi. Hello again. Huge says, why do you kiss hot dogs before you eat them? You've got the wrong person. Jock says, favorite pizza, pepperoni and pineapple. Alexa says, Sonic is not a Poppy Playtime character. I don't care. Dave M says, do you consider those who donate Don simps? No. Night Slayer says, can you still one bite a hot dog? That's not my thing. R4 says, actually Sonic is my son in Poppy Playtime. Okay. S Brandy says, S stands for Skeffington, my second name. Okay. Jeff says, you say what others are saying. Think about it. That's an interesting point. Nobody actually has brought that up, so that's interesting. All I do is just repeat like others, so that's humiliating, therefore. That's interesting. First says, Have you noticed that the Discord has become more developed? Will it ever become official, or will that be the one you make? I mean, if I ever have an official Discord, it'll be yours, I'll say that. I'm not gonna go and make my own. H says, wait, can you start over? I just joined. Why are you doing an NPC comment? You usually give unique comments. You're Gay says, you like my new name? Oh yeah, I just have to remind you. What? S Brandy says, different is this comment every time. What? Q says, if you go into white girl music, who would it be? I'm not gonna answer that, but I did listen to that song a second ago. The airplane shooting star song. S Brandy says, comment, is this different every time? Okay. Stars says, what's your least favorite Incredibox mod? I only know about Minecraft mods. FX says, Don, I thought it was a fart. Okay. The official says, Gushers or fruit roll up. Gushers. Cop says, psychopaths jack off to Taylor Swift now. Okay. Charlotte says, Ligma. Okay. The first says, comment, is this not different every time? I see what you guys are doing. Huge says, well, let me tell you something, brother. What are you gonna finna do when Hulkamania comes knocking for you? What? Jesus says, Takis or Doritos? Doritos. H says, I feel like this topic is more complex than people realize. Okay. Scooter says, hello. Hi. Stars says, what's the most annoying mob in Minecraft? Phantoms. J says, or Willy. Okay. Star, I already read that. X says, what small moment today deserved more appreciation than it got? I mean, I've ignored my pets today. They've been like seeking attention from me, but I was ignoring them. H says, I feel like this topic is more advanced than people realize. Okay. The Win says, do you like hamburgers or cheeseburgers? Cheese. Spunky says, do people cheat on Minecraft? If yes, how? I've used Future Client. Kit says, hi. Hello, Kit. Tris says, do you play Roblox? No. George says, balls. Okay. Zah says, what is better, HP or Dell? HP. Dexo says, have you seen a sunset lately? Yeah. Q says, have you ever gooned to a baddie? No comment. HS says, I feel like this topic is more sophisticated than people realize. You're doing your own, this comment is different every time thing. Okay. Symbol says, have you ever ate a door? I have not. S Brandy says, Skeff, I would like to promote your channel. Okay. Alfie says, can you shoot Giddy? What? Spunky says, what does that future cheat you said do for you in Minecraft? It does everything. X-ray, flying, you know, all sorts of stuff. Stars says, do you like Hoppit? What? Intrusive says, have you ever put peanut butter on your dit and let your dog do the rest? No. First says, hot take. I don't like sunsets because that's when I'm always free. Sunrises are rare to see and feel free. Okay. HS says, I feel like this topic is more nifty than people realize. Okay. Zimmy says, are you bendy? No. Intrusive says, are you single? I'm gonna keep that private. Hev says, favorite university? I don't know, dude. HS says, bro said, let your dog do the rest. Psst, yo, I'm dead. Okay. and I'm starting to think you are not Ant-Man Gaming. The Wind says, do you know apples are red? Yeah, sometimes. Will says, Dawn, let me be noticed. I'll get to the point. Stars says, are you the quiet kid type in school? Yeah, but I'm not into guns. Ron says, if you get $10 and €10, which, just read the pinned comment. Real says, live your life to the fullest. Thank you. Q says, would you rather date Epstein or date Diddy? No comment. The Wandering says, you should smile more. I am right now. X says, what simple thing makes you feel instantly at peace? The sound of water running. HS says, this man said get to the point. Yo, why is this stream actually hilarious? So you're changing your opinion now? Comrade says cats or cowboys? Cowboys. Lucas says for real. Okay. F84 says, when will you get a job? One day. Paz says cat porn. Okay. T-Bone says read mine. There you go. Luke says I need a job. Okay. Intrusive says Kim Jong-un is good at gooning. Okay. Brooklyn says say 67 please and do the hand motion as well. No. Give me $500 and I'll do it. Maddie says if you're reading this, should I? You should not. You're good says Valium for world peace. Okay. Savage says, what's your favorite game? I like Rainbow Six Siege. First says people who think Don's boring need to realize how salty he can be. I mean, I'm okay thinking that people think I'm boring. That's totally okay. Gon says, do you like steak and eggs for breakfast? Not steak. Backpack guy super chatted. $2 Canadian. Thank you, Backpack. Backpack says cutest Dawn ever. Okay. Thank you, I guess. Thank you for your super chat, Backpack. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Cutest Dawn. Okay. Dexo says, have you ever met a president? No. Lucas says, bro is cute. Okay. A says, I don't know this streamer, but it's pretty without emotions. Okay. Luke says, what's the most annoying job or career path you can think of? Maybe an accountant? Anna says, hi, hello Anna. Rival says sunrise or sunsets. Sunrise. Backpack guy super chatted $1 Canadian. Thank you for your 2 super chats, Backpack. I appreciate it. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Awesome. Thank you, Backpack. Cutest Dawn ever, you said earlier. Okay. Cool says, read mine, please. There you go. Yuck says cats or dogs. Cats. Q says, if you were in a street fight with what martial art would you fight? Systema. Gon says, you're the only guy I've known named Don. Okay. The Wind says, do you like cheeseburgers or cheeseburgers? Cheeseburgers. Every says, I got bronchitis, ain't nobody got time for that. Okay. Brooklyn says, do you believe in God and why? I do not believe in the Christian God. Abdallah says hi. Hello, Ab. X says, if you woke up tomorrow with one completely new ability, but you don't get to choose what it is, would you still accept it? Yeah. Vision says, what would you do in the puppy playtime hour of joy? I would set the creatures on fire. Lucas says 21. Okay. Cop says, why do people hate liberals so much? No comment. Sour says, do you like answering dumbass questions? Yes. Star says, what's your favorite country? The United States. Q says, I just shit my pants, bro. Okay. Stars, already read that. Zimmy says, bro just said he would set them on fire. Yeah, I mean, they are flammable, right? The Wind says, does this entertain you? Yeah. Pazuzu says, owl porn. Okay. Spunky says, Tylenol gives you ass burgers. Okay. Kayla says, Lamar Jackson. Okay. Anna says, are you AI? No. Ralph says, what's first, the chicken or the egg? The egg. Charlie says, all of the helping verbs is, am, are, was, were. Thank you. Kayla says Dodgers. Okay. Stars says, they are flammable except the prototype. Okay. Adam says, hi Don, I'm back. Can I be a model? I'm not involved with modeling agencies or anything. Crazy says, what do you do instead of streaming? Listen to the Phone Losers of America. Gone says, are you afraid of someone using a picture of you on Grok for something nasty? I mean, I'd be interested to see that actually. Anna says, it looked like you have not blinked. Okay. Zimmy says, what car should I make an edit of? The Karuma from GTA 5. Spunky says, that's so skibbity. Okay. Ron says, how can you like your vulgar comments being read out loud? Because I'm an adult. Chihuahua says, what tribe are you? I'm not a part of I don't think I'm Native American. Adam says, hi Don. I already read that. Dexo says, do you like Shane Gillis? I've enjoyed his comedy, yeah. Laura says, should I subscribe to? No. The Wind says, what do you think of Oppressor Mark 2? I never played GTA when that was a thing. I played earlier than that. Dexo says, have you watched Tires? No, not that. Just YouTube shorts of him. Eru says, don't you know that I grind 2 4s? I'm on... What? Rival says, favorite subject in school? History. American history. Barry says, how long have you been doing this? 1 hour, 8 minutes. Nicole says, you play Siege? Yes, I like Blitz. Jay says, if you had $1 million, what would you do with it? Buy a Toyota Corolla. The Assy says, what short they post? I don't remember what Shane Gillis short I remember seeing a Stonewall Jackson based one. Jackson says, do you play Roblox? I don't. Nor says, do you enjoy streaming? Yeah. Tan says, remember when I said I had 19 viruses? Yeah, that was a lie according to the website. Okay. Dave M says, favorite porn star? No comment. X says, do you think people meet by coincidence or because their paths were always meant to cross? Coincidence. No such thing as destiny. First says, perfect length of a stream in your opinion, 5 hours? That was my previous opinion, but now I'm thinking 3 hours. Dexo says, have you ever had to end a friendship? Yes. Jackson says, could you make a Discord? It would be cool. There is a unofficial fan Discord, but I don't care to make my own. Or what says, do you make a decent amount from this? Yeah. Esme says, What do you think about OnlyFans? Never got into it. Gon says, did you have an N64 as a child? No. The Riz says, do you remember me? No. Joe OG super chatted $2 Canadian. Thank you, Joe OG. Joe OG says, really? A Toyota Corolla? Yeah, I'm not into cars. I just want something that works, you know? Like one from the 2000s. I don't want anything fancy. By the way, I did listen to that one song from the YouTube library that you recommended like many weeks ago. Just letting you know. Thank you. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you, Joe G. The Wind says, if you would have the Karen Kuruma, would you keep it? In GTA 5, yeah. Jackson says, did you once play a Game Boy? No. A Wii though, yeah. Nor says, what is the game you enjoy playing the most? Rainbow Six Siege. The Asib says, that's not how you pronounce my channel name. I don't care. Barry says, if your personality was an animal, which animal would it be? Panda, because I'm lazy. Sue says, if you got $50, what would you do with it? Maybe buy a better microphone. Gon says, Rainbow Six is toxic though. Yeah, and I've contributed to the toxicity. Carter says, I'm back. Okay. Anna says, do you like the Pokemon Eevee? No. Felicia says, are you smart and I'm new? I'm not smart. Asiake says, do you play with keyboard and mouse or controller? I've played mostly with controller, but I've mostly evolved into a PC keyboard player. Janet super chatted $5. Thank you, Janet. I appreciate it. I'm looking at the dog in your profile picture right now. Cute, fluffy dog. Thank you, Janet. Let me extend the timer on your behalf. Timer extended. Thank you again, Janet. Adam says, what do you make the number of the timer of 11.99? I don't care. Dave M says, are you cheap? Yes. Lucas says, more time, yay. Thanks to Janet. Stars says, what's your favorite meme? Source, trust me, bro. Jackson says, what's your favorite sports? Rainbow Six Siege Pro League. Dana says, favorite game if you're a gamer. I think I just answered that question earlier. Felicia says, what is the timer for? Figure it out. X says, if you could press a button and instantly master one skill, what would you choose? Songwriting. Jackson says, what's your favorite food? The cheeseburger. D1 says, I'm way better at R6 than you. Probably. JS says, yeah, figure it out, dude. Yeah. Joe OG super chatted $10 Thank you, Joe OG. Joe OG says, okay, if you win a big lottery, big, more than $1 million, I'm officially making myself your personal vehicle shopper. Laughing out loud. Hope your heart is not set on the Corolla. Laughing out loud. That's a 126 Ers tune. Nice. Okay. What do you recommend, Joe G, if I won the lottery? I don't know much about cars, to be honest. X says, if you could teleport anywhere right now, where would you go? Machu Picchu. Thank you again, Joe G. That's like an insane amount. $10. That's a big super chat. Thank you. Let me extend the timer on your behalf. Timer extended. I'm officially making myself your personal vehicle shopper. Yeah, what do you recommend, Joe G? I know nothing. Lucas says W donos, yeah. Adam says, please answer, what do you make the number of the timer 11 million? People can't super chat that much. By the way, Joji, I'm making you mod right now. Thank you again. Cop says, does social media usually make you want to kill people too? Or just sometimes? I don't want to kill people at all. Yano says, the Toyota Corolla is considered one of the best cars because it is extremely reliable, affordable to maintain, fuel efficient, and built to last hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Yeah. TCL says, is this the internet? Help, I'm scared, there's a person on my screen. This is a part of the internet, yeah. The Wind says, Dawn Power Wash. Okay. Captain Olimar super chatted $5 American. Thank you, Captain. Captain says, hello, Donito, fard. Hello, Captain. Back with your fards again. Okay. I appreciate it. Let me increase the timer. Timer increased. Thank you, Captain. Luke says, now I want a Toyota Corolla. Okay. Zane says, what's your opinion on Epstein? He had a pretty interesting way of decorating. Joe OG says, aw, thanks. If the lottery is a healthy Powerball win, Bugatti, I suggest a chauffeur too. Yeah, if I won the lottery, an insane amount, I would never want to drive again. Dexo says, what language would you like to know instantly? Spanish. Fat says, how do you feel about Diddy prison sentence? I wish it was longer. Spunky says, I have 2 Toyota Corollas. Really? You're someone that trolls a lot, so I'm suspicious. Gon says, what would your Silent Hill look like? What? X says, I know about Machu Picchu. I'd like to go there too. What other places would you like to visit? What else? The Parthenon. Cloudy says, would you rather know every language or master every sport? Master every sport. Meow says, what would you do if you were stuck with Mr. Beast? Try to, get him to give me money somehow. Just put me in a challenge, please. Roblox says, I love your hair. Thank you. Liz says, if you were offered the ability to fly, but every time you fly, you crap your pants. No. Juju says, I'm late to the party. I just got off of work. What's up? Hello, Juju. I hope work was good. The Wind says, are oranges because they're orange? The fruit came first. Stars says, imagine Creekcraft joins. What do you do? I'll say hi to him and then move on. Random says, do you remember me? I don't. Unknown says, who's better, mom or dad? The mother's the more useful in the way because you have to grow in the womb. Spunky says, me? Troll? Never. Okay. Jackson says, remember me when you become famous. No. Esme says, you didn't read the whole message. I don't care. Fat says, McDonald's or Donald's? McDonald's. Gon says, let me rephrase, what would your personal hell look like? Feces everywhere. Adam says, why do you not answer me? Because your comments are boring. Jenny says, hello, I am doing this instead of my 6,000 word essay, which is due in 2 hours, and I haven't started. Wow, you're screwed. Yeah, you're gonna fail. Jackson says, what's your favorite book? Wisdom of Life, Schopenhauer. Villanelle says, what do you think about evolution? It confuses me, but I believe it. The Wind says, whoever moves first is gay. Okay. Liz says, I actually have a 1995 Toyota Corolla and never had a major problem with it. Great car. Wow, that's crazy. Joe G says, wow, you're screwed. Yeah, that's what I said. It's true. Jenny says, I think Jackson's favorite book is Percy Jackson. Okay. Meow says Palestine or Israel. I choose the cat thing in your profile picture. TCL says, is Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, please? What? Dana says, how much money would it take for you to spend a full night in a cemetery alone? $10,000. Marciel says, how many countries in Earth? 190? Daphne says Trump or Biden. No comment. Cat Cheese says Popeyes or Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A. Ron says, do you get recognized in your place for your stream? No, I'm not. I'm extremely niche. Kobe says penis fart. Okay. Mike says, do you swallow or spit? No comment. Adam says, why do you not answer me? Because you're annoying. The Wind says, do you spit on it before starting? I don't have gay oral sex. Jackson says, can I become mod? No. Joel says, I. Okay. Colt says, yo, pause. Okay. Anime says, you should love Israel like you always do. Okay. Hockey says, everyone rage bait. Okay. Somebody says, the Mercedes-Benz W1 is a range of executive cars produced by German. Okay. Flash says, do you remember me? No. Cloudy says, thanks for putting me on the screen. You're welcome. Joe G says, I slit a sheet I slit, upon a slitted sheet I sit. Okay. Def says, ... Okay. Juju says, politics don't matter. Don is cool no matter how he votes. Okay. Scooter says, look up TX2 please. No. Mike says, are you a top or bottom? No comment. Toasty says, do you like the band Gorillaz? I like that one Lonely Hill song. Jackson says, I love French toast. How about you? I like it too. X says, if your life was secretly being watched like a movie, what would the audience be yelling at you to do right now? Maybe destroy my gaming PC setup. Dexo says, the Basset Hound is the slowest dog breed. Okay. Felix says, do you know Stray Kids? I don't. Cool says, please answer. Get to the point next time. Dana says, white back to front or front to back? I don't want to talk about poop. Hunter says, you are a good YouTuber. Thank you. Joe OG says, did you like the song? Yeah, but I want something more, like, less emotional. Like, I want something cold-blooded, like, in terms of music. Like, I don't want something, like, emotional in the background. I want something that's, like, not distracting. Luke says, what's the creepiest disease you heard of? Ebola? Adam says, hey, I'm not annoying. Okay. Shapeshifting says, everyone is dead where I live. Okay. Got it. Jake says, how are you today? I am good. Stephanie says, hi. Hello, Stephanie. Shapeshifting says, if you die in real life, you die in real life. Yeah, hardcore. TC says, how have hardworking, humble humans honestly handled horrendous, historical... Okay. Joe OG says, the word you're looking for is bland. Yeah, I mean, that fits. Anime says, the mods' comments are pick 99% of time. Yeah, they gave me money. Luke says, yeah, Ebola is horrible, but rabies is worse. You're right. Spunky says, don't eat crackers in bed. I won't. Hussein says, I love the way you say okay. Alright. Cloudy says, do you know Roblox? Yeah. Vision says, who's going to get the One Piece in real life? Ross Ulbricht. Shapeshifting says, I'm Ebola. Ebola D's nuts. Okay. The Wind says, are you a toe sucker? No. Luke says, do Therians suck? Yes. Madden says, do you have a job? Maybe. Anime says, so you have to super chat to become a mod? Yes, a yellow super chat. Red says, I have ball cancer. Sorry. Noah says, are you a single father? No. Dana says, favorite athlete of all time? Wayne Gretzky. Spunky says, are the gray name peasants complaining? Step your game up and throw your $10 away and get a blue name. Yeah. Jackson says, do you have Riz? No. Sour says, that's where it spits. Okay. S. Brandy says, this sentence hath a lot of tea, therefore there is trillion to neither in this track of teeth soundeth. Whatever that means. Jeff says, would you pay someone to basically say the same thing you say? Why? Welcome to Walmart. What? Bones Jones super chatted 20 American dollars. Thank you, Bones Jones. I appreciate it. Bones Jones says, I'm out. Have a good one. I didn't know you were here. You usually don't type. I hope you enjoyed the stream. See ya, Bones Jones. Have a good day. Thank you. I appreciate your super chats a lot. Let me extend the timer on your behalf. Timer extended. Thank you. $20. That's a lot. Thank you. Shapeshifting says Wayne Gretzky. Okay. Joe OG says Bones W. Yeah. Yeah, Bones and Flippin' Gambler are pretty similar. They're both like type and very chill, like, I don't know. Jakey says, who is your basketball goat? Kobe. Liz says, the brain-eating amoeba is probably worse than rabies, as rabies you actually have more of a chance of survival. True. Gon says, are you a Target shopper or a Walmart? Walmart. I think Target is pretentious. Les says, what's your favorite hobby? Video editing. Unknown says, have a great day. You too. Juju super chatted 10 American dollars. Thank you, Juju. Juju says, my first super chat, pizza emoji. Your first super chat. That's cool. It's cool to see you super chat. Thank you. And by the way, you're a nice you're an above average chatter. You give more interesting messages on average. Thank you for your super chat. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you again, Juju. Valena super chatted $2 Australian. Thank you, Valena. Valena says, what was the best deed you proud about? The best deed? I don't know. I'm not a good Samaritan. Cop says, am I better or worse than average? You're better than average. Thank you again, Valena. The best deed. Have I changed someone's tire on the road before? No, I have not done that. Have I paid for someone's groceries? I haven't done that. I guess this says bad about me. By the way, thank you again, Juju. Juju, you are now a mod. Thank you. Luke says, what's better, Canada or America? America. Spunky Gooner super chatted $2 Thank you, Spunky. Spunky says, run a train. I hope for that, and I also don't hope for that. Thank you, Spunky. I simultaneously, believe both things. Thank you. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Run a train. Okay, Spunky. Jeff says, Walmart is where ugly rejects shop. You should be ashamed of yourself. Where should I shop at Target instead? The Wind says, you've made about $60 or more from this stream alone. Maybe. Just says, would you ever want the stream to end? Yeah. Shapeshifting says, I will shop in Walmart. Okay. It's a pig. Porma2. Porma2's brother. Juju says, I'm a mod, let's go. Yeah, thank you again. Coca-Cola says, I have a boner. Okay. Pancakes says, pancakes or waffles. I agree with you. I agree with your username, that is. Mero says, his smile is so pretty. Okay. Ron says, what inspired you to start this stream? I mean, half of, this stream is original. Just from my brain. Aiden says, what's your favorite book series? I survived. Coca-Cola says, my cock is a robot. Okay. The Font says, what's the longest you've streamed? 12 hours. Gone says, I've never killed anyone, I swear. Okay. Shapeshifting says, pancakes or bacon? Pancakes. Stick says, day one of asking him to do a face reveal. Okay. AD says, I can't see your -111 transparent. What? Daycal says Roblox or Minecraft. Minecraft is superior. The Wind says, you eat cheeseburgers. Are you vegan? No, I don't eat Impossible Burger. Pancake says, I survived a graphic novel or the actual books. The actual books. Oregon says, I know you love Pepsi. I like Pepsi. Luke says, are you gone? Are you sure about that? Okay. Luke says, I'm out. Have a good one, Don. See ya, Luke. Luke Groundwalker. Gone says, the fuck is I Survived, a book series for kids. Charlotte says, Canada or Philippines? Canada. PW says, would you win if you fought your wallpaper? I mean, my wallpaper is just black. It's like a black hole, basically, so I guess not. Juju says, if you could travel back in time, would you fix something or leave things as is? I would leave things as is because that I don't want to leave like this world behind. I'm attached to this world. Club says, chocolate or sour candy? Sour. Don says, do you have any pets? Yeah. Lucas says, handsome profile picture. Okay. Crab says, do you take breaks during streams? Only water breaks, like this one. Actually, sometimes I do a bathroom break, but those are rare. The Wind says, do you ever want to scream in a Starbucks and hotbox the place? Yeah. Charlotte says, bro, when are you gonna eat? In a few hours. Shapeshifting says, you got frame mogged by an ASU frat leader. Yeah. Gone says, someone has definitely used you for grok. I wonder. Jeff says, very interesting question. Man, I see why you shop at Walmart. Okay. Shapeshifting says, why do you hold your urine? Because I want to entertain you guys and not, be absent. Kid says, I applied for mod last night. in a VR game. Okay. Spunky says, I like salt and vinegar chips. Ever have salt? I can't recall doing that. Samuel says, what's up? Hello, Samuel. Shapeshifting says, my thingy is growing when you speak. Okay. I'm Random says, dang bro, you have 8.5k subs from just 2 lives. I've done more lives. Pazuzu says, penis cheese. Okay. Pancake says, Chargagog. Okay. Copra says, don't leave your LSD urine on the floor. Somebody might trip on it. What? Aragon says, if you say 67 as loud as you can, I will super chat 500. I don't believe you. Mufsa says, Don's got trucker piss bottles stashed throughout the room. Okay. Spunky says, I've used Grok on Don in the unofficial Discord. That was Grok you used? Okay. Coca-Cola says, who's your least favorite sexuality beginning with F? What? Aragon says, I swear. I don't care. Copra says, Grok sucks. Okay. Luke says, bye-bye. Bye, Luke. Forrest says, please be nice to him. Or don't. I'm okay. Mike says, you deep throat. No. Nevea says, you are so nonchalant. Username says, message. Okay. Yeah. Shapeshifting says, help me with today's crossword. No. Spunky says, I'm gonna be a rapper. A rapper, huh? Okay. Ron says, did you ever tell or ask anything to a streamer? What's that? Have I ever messaged a streamer in their live chat? Yeah. 7X says, you're gonna be a rapper with 1P. Okay. Gon says, do you regularly clean your room? Yes. Vilena says, do you want to travel? Not really. Nisha says, you look sleepy. Okay. Shapeshifting says, I am at Walmart buying everything. Okay. Brayden says, yo. Hello, Brayden. Jen says, do you have a manager? Maybe. The Wind says, have you ever took a shit in a milk carton at Walmart? No. 7X says, I'll give you a good question. What's pi equal? What? Aubrey says, Sabrina Carpenter or Ariana Grande? I don't care. Juju says, yeah, I'm his manager. We go way back. Okay. Aragon says, are you Christian? No. Lacey says, okay. Pancake says, give me your SS. What? Jeff says, I repeat people what they say. True. Timothy says, hola, little boy. Okay. Forrest says, how long have you been live? 1 hour, 38 minutes. X says, if humans suddenly lived 200 years, do you think people would become wiser or just procrastinate longer? Wiser. Juju says social security. Okay. Not Dana says, I sang if you're happy and you know it to a guy with no arms. Okay. Spunky says, did someone summon the DB management team? Reporting for duty. You're not my management. Sonny says, do you make good money from this? Yeah. Gon says, have you come to hate any chatters yet? Not yet, but I think eventually it's possible. Joe G says, when we go to Italy to buy your Bugatti, want to go see Senis before it disappears. I don't know what that is. Spunky says, "Oh, I'll manage you, Don." Winky face emoji. Okay. Juju says the SS comment. They meant social security. Crazy ask. Yeah, crazy ask. Jeff says, "Hate me." I don't hate you. You're an above average chatter. Joe OG says Venice. Oh, I mean, sure. Valena, super chatted $2 Australian. Thank you, Valena. I appreciate it. Valena says, I wish you do be happy. I am happy. Thank you, Valena. I appreciate it. Thank you. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you. 1K says pluh. Okay. Charlotte says, do you make money by just streaming? No, I make no money at all. I make zero money. No money. I do this for free. Shiloh says, are you excited for summer or will you miss winter? I'll miss winter. Pancake says, give me your social security number. No. The Wind says, hey Don Benitez, do you fart on it while you take anal? No comment. Forrest says, my dog is eating wood, what do I do? Get that. Stop the dog. Mike says, are you a virgin? No comment. Spunky says that Juju, winky face emoji. Okay. X says, if memories could be traded like objects, would you ever sell one? Yes. AD says, wheel emoji. Why are you farting? What? Jeff says, I'm going to watch one of my favorite gaming grumps. See you. Don't work too hard. See ya, Jeff. Bully says, would you ever consider farting on it? No comment. AC says, meow. Okay. Charlotte says, wait, do you remember me? No. I says, eyebrows connected means a superior intellectual. It means the opposite. Lucas says meow. Okay. Liz says, every time people offer money in a comment, they never followed through. Yeah. Joe OG says, instead of no comment, you should say what ChatGPT says. Apple. ChatGPT says that when they don't want to respond? Really? Oh, or is that some kind of Apple joke, like the company? I don't get it. Goku says, if you had $100 on your bank account, what or who would you spend it on? Food? The Wind says, you make me horny. Okay. University says meow. Okay. Casey says hi. Hello, Casey. AC CR1KJ super chatted $2. Thank you, AC. AC says, I enjoy you reading people's comments. Thank you. I enjoy receiving super chats, especially if they have a cute dog in their profile picture. Thank you. Let me extend the timer on your behalf. Timer extended. Thank you. Shapeshifting says, Google me. No. Pancake says, okay, then give me your address. No. The Wind says, have you ever drunk vomit out of a man's mouth? No. Timothy says, this has me laughing, rubbing my belly and farting. Okay. Spunky says, I'll super chat you $2 if you read this. I believe you, but I mean, if anyone's gonna follow through, it's gonna be you. There's still a chance though that you don't, because you are a troller, but you do have more credibility than like a random guy saying that. AC super chatted $2. Thank you, AC. Thank you. AC says meow. I mean, I think a bark is more fitting, but meow is cool as well. Thank you. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you, AC. Spunky Gooner super chatted $2 American. Thank you, Spunky. You followed through. Thank you. I mean, it would have been a little cool if you didn't super chat and you like trolled me, because thank you, Spunky. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you. I also do appreciate that you followed through. It's like both would have been cool. Natalie says take a drink. I'll do that soon. Mango says, why is there a timer next to you? Figure it out. Juju says Spunky is a man of his word. Yeah, I appreciate that. But trolling can be fun. AC super chatted again, $2. Thank you, AC. AC says bark. Yeah, that fits your profile picture, unlike meow from earlier. Thank you. Bark. Thank you. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you. Bella says, have you ever eaten a chicken in front of a chicken? No. Pancake says, damn it. Phone number then? I'm not giving you that. First says, shapeshifting has the Temu version of Pormatu's profile picture. Yeah, that's true. Nish says, do you know a guy who eats food while laying down on an electric scooter? I've seen that. I think I've seen that with the skateboard, but in San Francisco, YouTube live streams. Juju says, you saying okay is my favorite thing. Okay. The Wind says, have you ever deep-throated so deep you vomited on it? No comment. Ruppa says 67. Okay. I says, I've legally changed my name countless times. To the government, I could be anyone. Okay. Nisha says, yeah, skateboard, my bad. Yeah, I have seen that guy. Zaf says, whatever that is. Marcel says, I literally watched an 1 hour video. Okay. Coca-Cola super chatted $2 Australian. Thank you, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola says, can I get timed out for saying fetch? No. I mean, I don't care about you saying that. That's totally okay. I guess you're saying that because of, all the bark, like, meow comments from earlier. I am also thinking about that Mean Girls thing. But saying fetch is totally fine. Thank you, Coca-Cola, for your super chat. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. You have an anchor in your profile picture? Okay. Jeff says, extended my pulse to move forward and get this pain of your voice over. Okay. Spunky says fetch. It's okay to say that. Icy says, remember me, Don Daddy? No. Tarango says, okay is definitely Don's best comment. Okay. JK says, dies Spunky like spunk? No comment. Coca-Cola super chatted $2 Australian and says, I meant felch. I don't know what that means. Is that I think that's a sexual thing. I mean, I hope it's not something racist, but I'm sure I think I allow that. Yeah. Thank you for your super chat. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you. Juju says, quit trying to make fetch a thing. Yeah, Mean Girls. AC says, felch me. What on earth am I saying? It's probably something disgusting. Spunky says, don't look up F. Don, you're welcome. Yeah, it's probably something gross. Juju says, do you like the movie? Yeah, I saw it in the theater. It's a fun watch. Lucas says, laughing my ass off. What? Okay. Nevea says, what is going on? People say the craziest shit. Yeah, they do. Dexo says, My greatest fear is meeting a polar bear, and I don't have Coca-Cola. Ha. Gon says, I'm never gonna forget that vomit from a man's mouth comment. Okay. Capra says, never look up the movie Fletch. Chevy Chase is gross. Okay. Spunky says it's a disgusting sexual thing. Okay. Jen super chatted 10 American dollars. Thank you. Jen says, give me the power, Don. I'll give you the power. I just gave you the power. You now have moderator. You have the power to ban people and delete messages, but don't do it though. Don't actually use your power, but I did give you the power. Jen says, you're welcome, Don. Don. Jen. Thank you again, Jen, for your super chat. I says, you should only accept American money as a patriot. No. And because of your super chat, I'm gonna extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you again, Jen. Gon says, Fletch isn't gross, it's about arrows. I mean, it's probably slang for something gross. X says, if your brain had a pause overthinking button, how often would you press it? I mean, I definitely would press it when I'm driving. JK says, say hi, mommy. No. Joe OG says, I looked it up. Ew. Okay. The first captain says, what kind of Dawn stream would this be if we didn't accept IDR? Yeah, Indonesian rupiah. Yeah. Nisha says, do you play games? I play Minecraft beta. Dave M says, Dawn is a Marxist. No. Grim Reaper says, I'm coming for your fucking toes, bitch. Okay. The Wind says, have you ever busted in your grandpa's breathing machine? No. Juju says, if I super chat, can I pick someone else to be mod? Yes. JK says, you said hi, mommy. That's true. That you're true. I was wrong earlier, but I think I didn't look into the camera and say it. I was declining doing that. Rooster says, what's your favorite game? I like Rainbow Six. Nisha says, remember when Snapchat had games? No. Pancake says, do you like my profile picture? It's me, Goose. That's a cute goose. Spunky says, do you want the Webster Dictionary definition of Felch, Don? Yes. Dexo says, can you free Ireland? I don't have that power. Liz says, I'm distracted. Juju super chatted 10 American dollars and says, mod any. Okay, I'll do that. I'll mod X. They've changed their name. I prefer any as their name, but I allow them to do as they will. Thank you, Juju. Let me extend the timer. Timer extended. Thank you again, Juju. Joe says, do you play chess? I've played it a few times. Charlotte says, bye, Don. I will eat. I will come back later. Bye, Charlotte. X says, thank you. Purple heart emoji. This is Any, by the way. This person used to be named Any, but now they're named X. So I'm gonna mod this person on Juju's behalf. Gon says, I looked up Felch. It's gross. Okay. X says, I don't need your permission to change my name. Yeah, that's true. I don't know why I phrased it like that earlier. I apologize. Juju says, I like Any. Okay. Bella says, I am so sorry for your loss, and I know that your mom was very upset. What? Spunky says belch, blah blah blah, blah 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 blah. Okay, that got it. JK says pick me for mod. No comment. X says I like you all as well. Okay. AC says some people care about being mod. Let them be. Okay. The Wind says you give me hard boners. Okay. Cop says, what's your favorite boomer shooter? I played Boom Beach for like half an hour. That's not what you're talking about, but that's what I'm thinking. Jeff says, get beat up mod. Okay. X says, if your life suddenly had video game achievements, what achievement would you unlock today? I mean, I don't know. Juju super chatted for the first time, so Jackson says, can you put a smile on your face? By the way, I'm back. Later. Bella says fa. Okay. Victor says, who do you love more, your mom or your dad? No comment. The first captain says, cursed definition, but not as bad as I thought it would be. Yeah, not as bad. For Google says, Google it. What? Luna says hi. Hi. Rooster says, I broke my tailbone. It hurts. Sorry. Juju says, pineapple goes on pizza and nobody can argue because I'm mod. Okay. Aiden says, hello, sorry to bother you, but have you ever read SBG? No. JK says, remember me? Is the worst question there is? Yes. Boone says, hi YouTube. Okay. Shapeshifting says, why is pizza on my pineapple? I don't know. Copro says, don't look up Fletch, just don't. I won't. Joe OG says, ability to breathe underwater or not needing sleep ever. Not needing sleep. Imagine all of that extra free time. Spunky says, I lost my virginity to a girl named Maggie, and it's bothered me ever since. I like the name Maggie. Jeff says, hall monitor. Back in my day, they got their ass kicked. Okay. Juju says, oh yeah, I forgot to ask how your day was. How was your day? Great, thank you. Gone says, humans are disgusting creatures. All creatures are. Dave M says, how long can you hold your breath? Like 20 seconds. Soup says, what's your opinion on me asking you about cats doing backflips? I appreciate that it's a unique comment. Shapeshifting says, I'm wit yo bi getting top on IG live. Okay. AD says 101% of the stream. Okay. -1% of the stream. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Mahomie says, do you know Patrick Mahomes? No. Grim says, give us a genuine smile and I'll sub. Keep your sub. I don't want it. Did says, okay. Alright. Pancake says, can you adopt me, please? No. Joe OG says, rolling on floor laughing. Maggie traumatized this poor guy. Don's response, I like the name Maggie. I do like the name. Liz says, what the fuck happened to common sense? It seems no one has it nowadays. Okay. X says, if every brave decision created a star somewhere in the universe, how bright would the sky be because of you? Not too bright. Copper says, we had a little dog named Maggie. She disappeared at the same time as our other dog. That was pretty suspect. Okay. Juju says, I won't adopt Pancake, but I'll take their credit card number. Don't give your information to Juju. Nisha says, are you okay? Yes. Not Danny says, my cat is eating tampons, what do I do? Get the cat away from there. X says, what's a moment you wish you could replay? I don't think I would want to do that. First says, what's a stupid game you played as a child? Minion. I remember playing Minion Rush. That was a horrible game. Juju says, what's a credit card number? I'm a visual learner, by the way. Okay. Shapeshifting says, let's bed rot. No. Big Brain says, what if my dog ate 7 Hershey's bar? Go to the vet. Copra says, did you ever play Mousetrap? Yeah, I played that board game, yeah. Official says, what's the craziest thing you did at school? Nothing, I was a goody two-shoes. Forma2 says, I get baptized every now and again, so I'm a born-again virgin and can claim as such on Grindr. Okay. Pac-Man says, remember me? No, I don't. The Wind says, how do you like the name Dick Devourer? I dislike it. Ryan says, brush your teeth. I do. Gon says, did you ever have a crush on one of your teachers? No. TJ says, hi, I'm new. Hello, TJ. Soul says, what is your favorite game? I like Warframe. X says, what place instantly makes you feel calm? The restroom. Juju says, did you have a DS when you were a kid? No, but I remember seeing people with them. Jack Wayne says, please put me on the thing, please. There you go. Ed says, what is the weirdest thing you did as a kid? I mean, I remember, I think I pit insects against each other. EA says, I searched Fletch. Okay. Kingston says, get a haircut. I will. Pac-Man says, you sound like you hate 3 minutes. What are you saying, dude? Malibu says, a bunch of sexual emojis. Okay. The First Captain says, I meant stupid, like unnecessarily dangerous. Bloody knuckles, but sure, I played Minion Rush as well. I kind of knew that that's what you're saying, but when it comes to like weird, dangerous in-person games, I'm not too sure. I didn't play Red Rover. Official says, did you ever have a crush? No comment. Sahara says, I goon to you so hard. Okay. Jeff says, he is saying you suck. Okay. The Wind says, have you ever shit in your hand and threw it at someone in the middle of a porn video? No. Ross says, is Pacific Rim a good movie? I heard it was okay. Gon says, did you hate school too? Yeah. Marty says, why are you blatantly homoerotic? Kudos for all the gayness. Personality. Mahomes says, what's your favorite NFL team? Seahawks. Meme Slaw says, are you in the files? No, if I was, I'd be a victim, and I wasn't a victim. Ron says, this stream is like the universe never-ending conclusions. Okay. Joe OG says, really? You seem like the type that liked school. I mean, there was good and bad, but overall bad. Juju says, do you believe telepathy is possible? With Neuralink, but other than that, no. Copro says, everybody's obsessed with gooning these days. Back in my day, we jerked off. Okay. Rock says, are you gay? I am heterosexual. Sahara says, do you goon to thick furry femboys? Not my style. EA says, thank you for putting me up there. You're welcome. Ross says, have you ever farted on your finger? No. Saul says, how are you? I am good. Job says gay. Okay. Joe OG says favorite baseball team. I couldn't even name a baseball team. Monkey says, what do I say to my crush? Just do small talk. X says, I'd like to see your video edits. Could you upload something for us, please? Maybe I could do something in the fan Discord. Upload it there. Maybe. Alumni says, if your dream job required you to get microchipped, would you? Definitely. The Wind says, have you ever ate cereal out of a stretched asshole? No comment. Joe OG says, Toronto Blue Jays. Okay. Coca-Cola says, if you could get diddled by any celebrity on Epstein Island, who would it be? Maybe Stephen Hawking. Cyclass says, whatever on earth that is. Okay. X says, yes, please. Yeah, I might upload the video edits. Ethan says, some comments are weird in my opinion. Yeah. Shapeshifting says, you got no life and no future and no family and just nothing. Okay. KX says, I have my hand on my cock. Okay. Joe OG says, Dr. Pepper is root beer and Coke mixed together. That can't be true. Joseph Barrera says, Don is straight. Source? Trust me, bro. I mean, you can use me as a source. Mystic says, do you play sports? No. Juju says, how do I join the Discord? I don't know. I mean, maybe someone in the chat can help you. Shapeshifting super chatted $1 Australian. Thank you, Shapeshifting. Sweetheart. I appreciate it. I'm looking at your hog picture. Similar to Porma2's profile picture. Except, wait, is there a cigarette in your profile picture? It kind of looks like there is. Is that, am I really seeing that right? Are you really, like, copying Porma2 that much? That's pretty interesting. Porma2 says, I'm so bricked right now. I mean, that is cool how, like, yeah, that's cool how he copied it. First says, yeah, it's a cigarette. Wow. And because of your super chat Shapeshifting, I'm gonna add to the timer. Time added. Thank you again, Shapeshifting. Jeff says, OMG, a cigarette. Okay. Jeff says, okay. Alumni says, bring back Femboy Stormtrooper. Yeah, I support that cause. EA says, Messi or Ronaldo? Messi. Real says, remember me? No. Sahara says, bro goons to 67 City Boy. NPC emojis. Okay. Zane says, hi, hello Zane. Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing right now? Lucas says, holy shit. Yeah, that's how I feel right now. Shapeshifting super chatted $100 Australian. Wow, that's crazy. Thank you, Shapeshifting, for your 100 Australian dollars. That's crazy. Thank you. Shapeshifting says, how do I cancel a super chat? You can't. If you use Streamlabs and you donate with PayPal, you can charge back. But with YouTube super chats, you can't like charge back or cancel it. So I'm keeping that money. Thank you, Shapeshifting. I appreciate your insane amount of money a lot. Thank you, dude. And by the way, this is Shapeshifting's, I think, second 100 Australian dollars super chat. So I really appreciate you. Thank you. Let me add to the timer. time added. Thank you so much, Shapeshifting. That's like, I can't fathom like that amount of money. Like, that's insane. Thank you. Pac-Man says, are you okay? I mean, I'm pretty flustered because of Shapeshifting super chat. Mermaid says, Rodney Mullen, bam. Okay. Coca-Cola says, if you got diddled by Stephen Hawking, that's kind of on you. Okay. Copro says, do you think there would be less bad violence if we had more good violence? Is that an argument against gun control? Joseph says, W for Pormatu's copycat. Yeah. W, shapeshifting. Shapeshifting says mod. Yeah, you definitely deserve that. So the guy that super chats $100, I forget to give them mod. That's horrible. I'm sorry. You now have mod. Preston says, are you gay? I am not gay. Matthew says, my boss is named Ruben Chavez. He lives in Kansas. Okay. Jujuice is laughing my ass off. Yeah. Shapeshifting says test. You got it. By the way, I thought you were gonna go forever. Last stream you said you were leaving forever, but I'm glad you came back. Pormatu says, Big Shoe, laughing my ass off. Is Big Shoe a guy in the chat? Big Shoe? I don't see anyone with that name. Liz says, if someone offered you the choice of... I'm bored. Lily says, I subscribed. Okay. Pormatu says, no, I don't know what you're talking about then. Zelda says, headset looks dumb. Okay. Kingston says, where are you from? The States. Mermaid says, blah blah blah, Pluto, plutonium. I use plutonium to play Black Ops 2. Joseph says, mod for me too, shapeshifting. JK, you don't have to. Okay. Pac-Man says, nice love, I'm kinda depressed. Okay. Shapeshifting says, I'm bored and this was a waste of money. I regret it deeply. I'm sorry. I mean, I kind of feel bad that I'm not like acting like a chimpanzee jumping all over the place, because that is a crazy amount of money, but I'm a pretty chill guy for good or for bad. RDR says hi. Hello, RDR. Joe OG says rehydrate. Okay, I'll do that. First says, I'm convinced shapeshifting is so bored of life. Okay. Big Brain says, are you gay? I am not gay. Pormatu says, he even wears the chill guy shirt. The chill guy shirt? I forget what he wears. I know he wears blue jeans. I don't wear blue jeans. The Wind says, are you into furry porn, but the male has an uncircumcised dick? No comment. Snow Bear says, if I got a snake bite, would you suck out the venom? Regrettably. Mystic says, shapeshifter, are you good? Okay. X says, if your personality had a secret cheat code, what would it unlock? Me being much more cheerful and less monotone. Joseph Barreras says, Big D Wonderhole vibes. Yeah, exactly. Like, literally, whenever I get a red super chat, I always am reminded by Big Dick. Thank you again, Shapeshifting. And I see you've changed your profile picture to Punch's toy orangutan. Coca-Cola says, Don wears mom jeans. I wear dark gray jeans. First says, if they want to see you jumping like a monkey, they can make it with AI. I've seen weird AI things of you. Yeah, maybe Spunky could do that. By the way, I just realized that maybe Shapeshifting changed his profile picture to that because I was talking about monkeys and chimpanzees earlier. Joe OG says, there's a helicopter over my neighborhood. Okay. Shapeshifting says no. I'm pretty sure you changed your profile picture to that because of what I was talking about. I don't believe you. Adomation says, wait, why do you not believe in God when he made you? He did not make me. Shapeshifting says, man, fuck this. I'm sorry. Pac-Man says, Fredo Santana. Okay. Shapeshifting says, my money is all gone. I'm sorry. Get your impulse control under control. Kingston says, Goss is not real. Okay. Pancake says, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? No. Green says, do you like di or puh? I'm straight. Jeff says, I'm God. Okay. Laurel says, you are cute. Okay. Juju says, I like the monotone. You do? That's... I mean, to be honest, I kind of wish I wasn't so monotone, but... Dom says, we almost have the same name. Dom, true. Asayake says, yes, Die Hard is a Christmas movie, but it's not Christmas-based, it's just like on the side. Joseph says, I'm sorry, Don, I'm waiting for a new debit card. That's why I haven't been donating. Oh, that's why. I did notice that, but thank you for your previous super chats, by the way. Mason says, I crying emoji, I add you please too. What? Philly says, hi, how are you, pal? Did you get sleep? I did get sleep, thank you. Egg says, gay? I'm straight. Capra says, God is Israel. Okay. The Recon says, God is real. Okay. Spunky says, hey Don, tell Juju I have the same @ on Discord message. I'll get you in Discord. I mean, I guess Juju knows now. Just message Spunky Gunnar on Discord, that username, the same one he has on YouTube, and you'll get invited. Bug says, is that one person still making edits of you? Jamal still does that, yeah. X says, I like it when you show natural emotions. Yeah, me too. JS says, bro's debit card is gone out of the woods. Okay. Pancake says, middle, edge, or corner. Brownie, middle. By the way, the timer no longer is increasing. I am locking the timer. That's the highest the timer is going to be. If you super chat, I no longer increase the timer. Juju says, are you uploading the stream later? Sorry. Sarah says, do you play Fortnite? I do, yeah. Asayake says, T-1 hour. Yeah. X says, if you could watch one moment from your life from a stranger's perspective, which moment would you choose? I mean, maybe I would watch, right now I'm thinking of 9/11 as a victim, which is pretty dark, but I don't think I would do that, but I don't know why that thought came up in my head. Philly says, I hope you sleep well like a cat. Okay. Juju says, I mean posting it so I can rewatch the grand moment I became mod. I mean, my past streams are like almost all available. You just have to go to the playlist section of my channel to see previous streams. Coca-Cola says, I'm your next door neighbor's dog. Every time I bark, I'm telling you to cleanse the city. Okay. Filter says, can I be mod? No. Sarah says, I love your videos. Thank you. Neptune says, oh my lord, Die Hard isn't a Christmas movie. Yeah. Gon says, would you watch your own birth? Sure. Bones Jones says, is the timer dead? Yes. It's no longer increasing. Porma2 says, can I be channel administrator? I don't have a purpose in that. Copro says, Son of Sam or the Zodiac Killer. Zodiac. Jeffrey says, the Kool-Aid Man got pregnant. Okay. Pac-Man says, Satan or God. God. Big Brain says, are you gay? No. Haven says, how hot do you own? What? X says, 9/11 makes me think of the asbestos. Okay. Sour says, did Batman alike in Arkham or... I don't know what you're saying, man. Ilumi says, this is my favorite stream to watch while speeding down the freeway. Okay, don't do that. Shapeshifting says, she don't believe in shooting stars, but she believes in shoes and cars. Kanye. X says, do you know what asbestos is? Something with houses, construction, that's toxic. Dexo says, 9/11 makes me think of that tragedy. National tragedy. Joe OG says, if you had to resort to cannibalism, what body part would you eat first? Maybe the arm. Say says, what the fuck is this? Okay. Big Brain says, are you gay? I am heterosexual. John Ben says, you excited to die for big Netanyahu? No comment. Spunky says, 30-hour rule in effect on? If I get $30 before the timer ends. Porma2 says, 9/11 makes me think of anthropomorphic plane porn. Okay. Gon says, my grandfather met the Night Stalker a long time ago. Okay. Shapeshifting says, 97 is your Instagram code, don't share it. S1. I mean, why are you telling me this? Someone might use that, deviously. They could get into your Instagram, maybe. Pac-Man says, I will give you the N-word pass. No, thank you. Big Brain says, are you gay, bro? Answer. I am not. Young says, Don, are you having beef with your barber? I'm having beef with myself. Spunky says, is the 30-hour rule like an In-N-Out secret menu item? Yeah. But I want to, like, include it, like, somewhere eventually. Like, maybe I'll include it in the pinned comment eventually. Like, right now, I only let people know about it by voice, but Alumni says, it would be cool if the US turned the Gaza Strip into New Vegas. Casinos, amusement parks. Okay. Porma2 says, Don, that was real demon shite. Okay. Coca-Cola says, have you seen Christmas tree porn? Okay. Joe OG super chatted 5 Canadian dollars. Thank you, Joe OG. Joe OG says, arm? That's like choosing a chicken wing rather than a steak. 5 of 3. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like eating the chest or the stomach would be gross. That seems like intimate or something, but like the arm, definitely not the head, but like the arm, it seems like not that gross. Thank you for your super chat. That's 5 out of 30. Thank you. Jimmy says, your hair got long, bro. Are you going to get a haircut soon? In maybe like a month. Big Brain says, do Iranian unicyclists drink cow? Frizz, no comment. Marley says hi. Hello, Marley. Q says, goon. No. Sunshine says, hi, do you remember me? I do. Juju says, do you think being married to a robot that understands everything about you would cause loneliness or happiness? Loneliness. Kevin says, Islam worships a pedophile. Okay. Queen says, do you like anime? Not particularly. Young says, I like how you smile when you get a super chat. Okay. Joe OG says, a month? Darlin, too long. What? Copra says, so do you, Kevin. Okay. Nexus says, I wonder if Don remembers me. I don't. Coca-Cola says, prove you're not AI, gay, or Jewish. No comment. Jake says, Catch is a cool direct messaging app with encryption, no servers, and uses Tor network. Interesting. Kevin says, whoever you are, leave my name out of your mouth, bitch. Okay. King says, this is an AI streamer. Okay. Spunky says, holy moose nipples. Okay. First says, his hair looks so messy in a stylish way though. I wish it wasn't messy. Joe says, your hair can't wait a month for the cut. Oh, maybe I should get to it sooner. Addie says hi, hello Addie. Gavin says hi, hello Gavin. Pac-Man says, can we roast each other? No. The Wind says, would you eat a cheeseburger out a gorilla's asshole? No. AN says, ho. Hello AN. Juju says, that was actually my very first super chat ever. Oh, like on any live stream? Wow. I'm a little honored, thank you. Young says, Don looks like the type of guy to laugh at a joke that's in his head. I do that. Pormatu says, you looked pretty good when it was kind of straight up. Yeah, maybe I'll return to that. Alumni says hi. Tate says, why does everyone at school say Juju? Oh, like that one Alex Jones thing? I don't know. Gon says, bro, that's normal laughing at a joke in your head. Okay. Juju says, yeah, I don't typically like streamers. It was worth it. Okay, thank you. Q says, fuck Kevin, bro. Okay. Andrew says, my cat ate my grandma. Okay. Samantha says, why are y'all hating on him? I don't mind, feel free to hate. Nexus says he has demons in his head that tell him little humorous jokes. Okay. Pac-Man says, please play Bloodhound. No. Q says, what's up, my neighbor? Hello, Q. Spunky says, my grandma's still alive. You're doing Pormatu's bit? Okay. Joe OG says, style should be headphone friendly. What? X says, if your brain could send one notification per day, what would today's notification say? I mean, make sure to stream within 30 hours because you're obligated to. Jupiter says, Nexus Green, those demons sound chill. Okay. Spunky says, my grandma ate my cat. Okay. Cooper says, me. Okay. AN says, WU. Thank you. Juju says, speaking of Kevin, haven't seen Guy today. I've seen him. Queen says, I ate my grandma. Okay. Kevin says, with a name like Juju, my guess would be you're either like 12 or on the spectrum. No comment. Mermaid says, the cat ate the lizard. Okay. Copra says, swipe up for more recommendations. Okay. Kingston says, this is the best stream ever. Thank you. Nexus says, W Don, we made the right Don Donless. Okay. Juju says, neither. Got it. The first captain says, can you mail me oats? No. Ron says, your children will cherish your streams. That's interesting to think about. Like, maybe my grandchildren watching this. Cooper says, this is yay. Okay. Kevin says, yeah, Juju, I call bullshit. Okay. Samantha says, I ate my grandma's cat. Okay. Random says daddy. Okay. Spunky says, fuck Kevin. Juju is better than you. That's why they have a blue name, peasant. Okay. X says, if your imagination had a room in your house, what strange things would be inside it? I'm not too sure. Porma2 says, your legacy is getting called gay and autistic. That's like 10% of it. Samantha says, my grandma ate my cat. Okay. Spunky says, I ate my cat's grandma. Okay. First says, we're not peasants, we're parasites. Yeah. Joe says, the haircut should be headphone compatible. Oh, interesting. Does that mean it has to be short? Juju says, thank you, Spunky. Okay. Angelic says, nice haircut. Thank you. Backpack says, Gunnar eats his own spunk. Okay. Just a Guy says, do you like System of a Down? I've never listened to their albums. Capra says, has eating Mike Tyson's ass ever paid you a super chat? I've never done that. Capro says, I'm not a parasite, I'm a M. Okay. Chris says, I love this stream. Thank you. Coca-Cola says, do you like Alabama hand grenades? I don't know what that is. Porma2 says, the typical viewer is a parasite, like MOI. The donators are symbiotes. Okay, I don't know that science, so I'm lost. Boy says, yo, remember me, Gboard guy? Yeah. Ty says, Southern hospitality, it's like a pineapple. Okay. Joe OG says, too many people hypertension focused on semen. Okay. Shapeshifting says S. Okay. X says, if your personality had a hidden level, what would unlock it? Some sort of video. Not like a physical item, but like a piece of media. Kaysen says, do you like the Braves? No. Juju says, I just don't want my real name on the internet. Juju is just a nickname a family member gave me. Got it. Shapeshifting says, sigh. Okay. Copro says, eating Mike Tyson's ass isn't an act. He's a philanthropist. Okay. Porma2 says, a symbiote has a give and take relationship with the host. A parasite just takes. Oh, that's totally true. Yeah. Yeah. Symbiotes are definitely donators. There's a exchange between donators and me, so we're symbiote. They're symbiote. Symbiotes. Gabby says, do you like my profile picture? Yeah, it's a cute cat. X says, if you had to explain you using only one story from your life, which story would it be? I don't know. Samantha says bye. Bye, Samantha. First says, I always just called it symbiotic. Okay. Angelic says, why do you act so nonchalant? Personality. Shapeshifting says, if your chud chudded a chud, would you rather chuddy chud or chud? Chuddy chud. Juju says, I see why people like being mod now. Because you get picked a lot? Yeah. The Wind says, have you ever nut into your family's milk carton as a prank? No. Rebane says, yo, you're chill. I like watching your streams, bro. Thank you, Rebane. Your name sounds familiar. Drake says, can I get mod? No. Shapeshifting says, take me to rehab because I can't get clean. No. Kevin says, Juju, shut your punk ass up. Okay. Porma2 says, do you waffle stomp in the shower? I don't. Random says, fuck. Okay. Vicky says, hi. Hello, Vicky. Alex says, can you ever laugh? I do that. Per says, do you dislike Christianity? No. The Bible's pretty cool, but I don't believe in it genuinely. Pac-Man says, if your feelings had their room, what type of room would they have? I don't know, dude. Copro says, Kevin, what color are your panties? Okay. Shapeshifting says, he said doo-doo. Okay. Q says, Kevin, shut the fuck up. Okay. Mus says, I hate slow mode. It's only 7 seconds. Dexo says, the Gold can be symbiotic if they take a willing host, or parasitic if they control host against their will. Okay. Random says, give me mod, please. Give me 10 American dollars. First says Microsoft or Adobe. Microsoft. Vicky says, how is your day going? Good. Kevin says, purple. They were your mama's panties. I took them home with me after I fucked her on your bed, boy. Okay. Juju says, I think Kevin should focus on things he enjoys in life more. Okay. Love says, do you believe in God? No. Porma2 says, boy. Okay. Mus says, it's not Mus, it's Void. I'll try to remember that. Connor says, daddy. Okay. Q says, Kevin, shut the fuck up. Okay. LeBron says, do you like him young? I'm not a pedophile. Copra says, mine are gray, by the way. Okay. Spunky says, Kevin needs Jesus. Okay. Drake says, hi. Hello, Drake. Mantis says, do you have a break character? I'm not playing a character. Shapeshifting says, a minor. Okay. Drake says, meowl. Okay. Ashley says, do you remember me? My favorite operator is Ace. Okay, I just like Thermite when it comes to hard breachers. Boya says, Kevin, shut the fucking up. Okay. Zachary says, you might want to look into being agnostic. It might be easier than being religious. Okay. Gemma says, hello. Hello, Gemma. The Wind says, Don, your name gives me boners so hard it could break a wall. Okay. Void says, freaky ass chat. Okay. JB says, don't be either. Just be spiritual. I think I agree with you. Spunky says, Kevin's mad because he's a closeted homosexual. He stole that dude's dad's panties, actually. Okay. By the way, Spunky, I think I saw you on a live stream different than this one. A live stream by Ian on YouTube a few days ago. Bones Jones chatted 20 American dollars. Thank you, Bones Jones. Bones Jones says, any other new stream ideas coming in the future? Well, in the coming months, all of my streams are going to be focused on me reading chat messages. But I plan to make some changes to the stream, though. Like, I think it'd be pretty cool if instead of doing the stream from my room, it might be pretty cool if I did it in a, like, outside, maybe in a public place. Just because I think it'd be cool just to, you know, have that as the background, like people walking around in the background. I just think that'd be a bit more interesting than a blank wall. But any, like, new ideas, like, completely different than this? No, I'm just going to be reading chat messages. Thank you, Bones. Let me add... No, the timer's locked. Thank you, Bones. Poor Matu says, what will you do about the bugs? Just pray. Juju says Kevin might be a chill guy in real life. Okay. Kevin says, I am Kevin. Bow to me. That makes you sound like a cornball. Right now I'm thinking of like the Minion, like Despicable Me. I am says Uwu. Okay. Random says, who is Kevin? Okay. I am says cornball. Okay. Gone says, still crazy how I lived 10 minutes from Ian on YouTube. Yeah, that is crazy. Q says, Kevin, shut the fuck up. Okay. X says, if your brain had a random thought museum, which thought would be the weirdest exhibit? Weirdest exhibit? Maybe that, something regarding conspiracy theories. Copro says, do you like Pupinia Stewart? Yeah, but I like BG Combi more. Melissa says, Stinky Dinker. Okay. Joe OG says, OMG. With some of the profanity you read. In public, you sure? Yeah, I think I could do it in a way that I'd be fine. Spunky says, Kevin must be the alpha. Okay. Star says, do you know how to do a backflip? No. Melissa says, do you like glitter dumplings? Haven't tried them. Asayake says, big gangster Cumby. Yeah, the bull. The first captain says, Kevin is literally King Bob. This is funnier because Kevin is one of the Minions' names. Yeah. Melissa says it's a squishy. Okay. By the way, if I receive $5 more before the stream ends, I'll stream again within 30 hours. Drake says, do you goon? No comment. Jimmy says, how would you read the profanity in public? Where would it be? I would have to, like, be far away from people. Like, I couldn't have people, like, within, like, 10 feet of me because I say obscene things. But I could be, like, 100 feet away. Kevin says, that person was the first one to get the joke, laughing my ass off. Okay. I wonder what you're talking about. I'm pretty curious. Cameron says, hi. Okay. Random says, shut the fuck up, Kevin. Okay. X says, if someone tried to guess your personality only by watching you for 10 minutes, what would they get wrong? That I'm this monotone in conversation? Ryan says, don't say the F word. I don't care what you have to say. X says, Ronaldo or Messi? Messi. Porma2 says, give bone dater. What? Spunky says, or donate to the Red Cross. What? Lori says, whoever is saying these rude things to him because he deserves better, no, feel free to say rude things. Kevin says, and I still haven't shut the fuck. Okay. Collector Nick says, hi Don, hello Collector. Shapeshifting says, Rancho Cucum M, I don't know what that is. Dallas says, hello Dallas. Porma2 says, I don't think you gave Bone Jones a mod maybe. I did not. Sorry. I mean, it doesn't matter that much, no offense, because he's kind of a lurker. All he does is super chat. He doesn't type normally. Thank you again, Bones, and you are now mod. Sorry that I forgot to do that. Bueno says, Don is Epstein's side piece. No. M says, I'm a master debater. Okay. First says, have ever heard someone ask who's Don to someone right in front of you? No comment. The Potter says, today is my birthday. Happy birthday. Random says, if you don't give mod, you're gay. I guess I'm gay. Dallas says, you're chill like me. Okay. Top row says, Rancho C is a city in California or some kind of experimental Tex-Mex cuisine. Okay. Coca-Cola says, Rosie O'Donnell or Scarlett Johansson, but I'm not a necrophiliac. Bones Jones says, all good, I just chill and listen when I can. I see. Thank you for your super chat again. Forma2 says, Don used his debit card to donate, which is basically using Israeli bank money to send funds to Israeli relief zones in an Israeli war. Do you have a charity recommendation, Forma2? Dexo says, he is he, but I am him. Okay. Ava says, do you know what Undertale is? Yes. X says, if the way you think about the world became contagious, what kind of world would we end up living in? A very cruel and apocalyptic world, unfortunately. Dallas says hello again. Hello, Dallas. Lovely says, Israel and Zionist are evil pedophiles. I condemn your comment. Forma2 says, in my opinion, local causes are more based. Okay, well, I can't do that because then that would reveal where I live. Lovely says, super choppy and blurry view. Okay. M says, I'm a master debater, are you? No. Drake says, do you goon? No comment. Benjamin says, hi, Nigel. Okay. X says, if someone followed your instincts for a day instead of their own, what surprising decision might they make? To, maybe to cut corners at work or school. And First Captain says, next time you can't stream even though we've met the 30 hours goal, you should make a poll so chat can decide which charity. That seems unnecessary. Like, I mean, that's a cute idea, but I mean, who cares that much to, like, that. Melissa says, do you support Trump? No comment. Jordan says, I'll pray for you because you don't believe in God. Thank you. Ava says, have you played Undertale? No, but I like the song Megalovania. M says, are you the guy from that one movie with the guy in it that is from that movie? What? Real says, favorite game? Not Red Dead Redemption 2, I'll say that. Boya says, Domino's or Pizza Hut? Domino's. The Potter says, alright Don, see ya after my exam, see ya the Potter. Coca-Cola says, Don's words of wisdom, I'm not a necrophiliac, yeah. Juju says, I'll be the charity, I'm not giving you money. I know you're being playful. Lemmy says, have you ever traveled to a new country alone? No. Dave M says, Don has TDS. Okay. Alumni says, hope you fail your exam. Okay. Forma2 says, it's the Potter's birthday. Yeah, happy birthday again, the Potter. Brad says, why didn't you text me that you were going live? Just use YouTube notifications. That's way too extra of me to go out of my way to text you. Alumni says, I've been looks maxing for the last 6 months, and it has improved my life. I recommend it. What have you done? Have you done limb lengthening surgery? TTV says, pickle my tickle for a nickel. No. Jojo says, why are you gay? I'm not gay. X says, if you had to describe your personality using only a place, where would it be? Only a place. Mexico. Brad says, honestly, YouTube notifications don't even be working. I have them on. That's... Maybe you're doing something wrong. Forma2 says, There's only one limb that you can lengthen without scrutiny. Okay. Juju says, charity needs a cause. I'm the cause, because I want money. That's my cause too. Spunky says, agree, Bradley. Okay. By the way, thank you again, Spunky, for your massive super chat. M says, Jeffrey Epstein, Diddy, Ava Chris Tyson, EDP. All of those guys have something similar. Dexter says, the Potter extorts all my money. Okay. Ryan says, rip my coochie open. Okay. Tony says, what does it mean to goon? It means prolonged masturbation. Carol says, what do you think about Charlie Clark? Kirk, I wish he had been assassinated. M says, who has the biggest sack? What? Dave M says, would you move to Iran if you could live for free? No. I love my dog says, do you like chickens? Not as pets. The Wind says, my balls are hairy. Okay. Random says, you were found in the Epstein files. Don't believe it. TT says, I won't be able to donate much this month. I am moving this month and have to pay muscular dudes to come move my stuff. I also don't have a truck. That's fair. You gotta have Brad Piff guys move your stuff. Okay, okay, I understand. Grantness says, what's 2 times 4? 8? Pormer2 says, Epstein made a donation to a Hispanic YouTube streamer. Really? I don't believe that. Dave M says, those dudes doing more than moving. Okay. Heavenly says, are you cheating on your girlfriend? No comment. Spunky says, I'll mod you next stream, TT. Titties. If you show up before it's over, that is. Huh, okay. Nice. Pormer2 says, I'm spreading misinformation online. Okay. Mav says, who is worse, Epstein or Diddy? Epstein. Boya says, welcome to Gboard Clipboard. Any text you copy will be saved here. Okay. M says, PP or balls? No comment. Juju says, how many more to reach 30? How many more? $5. $5. Captain says, thoughts on the game Sea of Thieves? It looks like a fun game. Drake says, Igoon, should I stop? Yes. Juju says, bet. Wow, you're going all out, it seems, for your first stream where you super chat. Alumni says, pretty privilege is real. Lookism? Okay. Porma2 says, $5 no Ola. Okay. Real says, but what is your favorite game? Red Dead 1? Jimmy says, I'm leaving. Bye. Bye, Jimmy. M says, no comment or no comment. What? X says, if your brain suddenly announced today we try something new, what do you think it would suggest? Sushi. Juju super chatted 10 American dollars. Thank you. Juju says, can you mod TT? Yes, I'll do that. I'll mod TT. Thank you, Juju. And your super chat makes it so that I will stream within 30 hours of this one ending. So your super chat is doing 2 things. Thank you, Juju. TT says, ah, Juju B. Heart emoji. Thank you, Juju. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you for your super chat. TT, you are now a moderator. X says, you have never tried sushi before? I haven't. The Win says, the boners you give me are unimaginable. Okay. Ryan says, I just gave vaginal birth to a quesadilla. Okay. Juju says, yay. Okay. X says you should. Rare X typo. Anyways, yeah, I'll get to that someday. Spunky says, if you can't meet the 30-hour deadline, maybe just add an extra 30 minutes to the next stream. That's a good idea, but I'd prefer to do the charity thing. Forma2 says, I respect all people equally. Okay. Dexo says, must have been the wind. The wind, okay. M says, are you sitting down? I am. Astro says, did you know that Bruno Mars is not from Mars? Yes. Dave M says, have you ever have a one-night stand during the day? No comment. X says, you're not gonna disappear again, right? I doubt it. The Wind says, my balls are throbbing. Okay. The Official says, how's your day going? Good. Everard says, have you ever heard of mountain chicken? No. M says, wait, do you have a headset on? Yeah. B says, I have shown up to most of your streams. How do you feel? I'm slightly grateful. Kevin says, Bruno Mars has a man-gina. I condemn your comment. TT says, Don, your hair is looking very nice. And silky. Are you enjoying it being long? Yeah. Spunky says, Spunky Gooner is my homosexual lover for life. Okay. By the way, did I see you in an Ian on YouTube live stream, or was that someone else? Lummy says, anyone want to get knotted? Okay. X says, can you show us your handwriting, please? Not right now, but maybe I'll get to that. Sorry. Fridge says, I have an idea for you. If someone donates $100 or more, they get mod for a week. That's a cool idea, I guess, but I'm not so sure. IBB says, can I get moderator? No. The Wind says, hairy balls or hairy vagina? No comment. TT says, bring a white erase board for next time. No promises. It's Re says, when are you ending stream? In 20 minutes. X says, please prepare for the next stream and write something for us. I might do that. M says, wait, is that a wall behind you? Yeah. Brad says, it's not a good idea because you disappeared for a week. What? TT says, I'm trying to help any. That's nice. Serenity says, do you have a girlfriend? No comment. Fandom says, have you listened to Epic the Musical? No. The Wind says, have you ever took a shit and smeared it on the wall? No, I have not done that. MM says, wait a minute, are you talking right now? I am. TT says, shots fired by Brad, haha. Someone is salty. Hi, hubby. Hubby. Okay. Brad says that was in reference to the $100 super chat for a week. Oh, I kind of forget what you said. Brad says it's not a good idea because you just disappear for a week. I would do that so, like, because I'm a scammer or something. That's funny. Ray says, the man, the myth, the legend. It's the Donald. Okay. Chroma says, have you pee yourself? Not that I can remember. Jake says, are you brushing your teeth, Don? I am. Santiago says, I be gooning. Okay. Astro says, did you know that Jeffrey Epstein was born on the same day as his birthday? Yeah. Joseph says, whatever that is. Okay. Razor says, opinion on viewbots and purchasing YouTube accounts. I have a negative view of that. That violates YouTube's policies. TT says, It would have to be $100 equals 3 chat mods, not measurable by time or days. I don't get it. Shapeshifting says W Stickler. Yeah, that's me. Brad says, TT my dear, I hope life is going amazingly and you have a smooth and swift move. Okay. The Wind says, my dick is so hard right now. Okay. Invisible says, hi Don. Hello, Invisible. Thank you again, Shapeshifting. Thank you, the most try-hard commenter. Spunky says, don't do it, Don. Don, change is scary. It is to me. Grantness says, stop saying that stuff, please. What? Adelina says, I'm. Okay. Dave M says, are you lazy? Yes. Holly says, hi. Hello, Holly. Copro says, do you think mass shootings are overrated? I don't know what you mean by that. Astro says, did you know we was all once the youngest person in the world for a second? Yeah, that's a crazy fact. Grantness says, who is Epstein? Tell me. I've heard that he was a pedophile. Jake says, are your teeth yellow or is it the lighting? It's a mix of both. The Wind says, have you ever stuck your dick in a beehive? No. Shapeshifting says, I'm a jump. Don't do that, Shapeshifting. Please don't do that. Kevin says, I don't work with the males because I used to be one. Okay. Dallas says, hello. Hello, Dallas. X says, if one simple question could change how someone sees the world, what kind of question would it be? What kind of question would it be? I don't know why, but I feel like it would relate to the animal kingdom. Brad says, big late W for the Shift Master. Yeah, I mean, he was here earlier. He's like popping in and out. Jake says, shapeshifting profile pictures warring. Yeah, I preferred his little cute puppy dog from earlier. Dunn says, greetings. Today I had a Turkey Club sandwich on sourdough bread with tomato, lettuce, cheese, bacon, and avocado aioli. That sounds pretty good. TT says, shapeshifting goat. Yeah. Something says, do you think there is a meaning of life? No. The Wind says, how do you like the nickname Titty Tickler? Not a fan. Juju says, I like the sad dog more. Yeah, that was cute. I'm a sucker for cute dogs and cats. Oxygen says, what's your opinion on foot stuff? Not my thing. H says, do you like femboys? Not really. Alumni says, the meaning of life is to enjoy it. Maybe. Dallas says, hello. Hello again. Rifty says, I'll donate if you remember me from yesterday. I don't, sorry. Dunn says, I also paired the sandwich with a side of tomato bisque soup. It was a great day. I never have soup. Maybe I should give it a try eventually. Ank says, my sis wanted to say hi. She's 5 years old. Okay. Bones Jones super chatted 20 American dollars. Thank you, Bones. I appreciate it. Bones says, catch you on tomorrow later. See ya, Bones. I appreciate your frequent and big super chats. $20? That's crazy. Thank you, man. See you later. See you tomorrow. TT says, bye, Bones. Yeah, bye, Bones. Holly says, big boner joner. Okay. Astro says, did you know that you can only go skydiving without a parachute only once? Yes. Brad says, WBJ. Yeah, I did not notice that. WBJ. Thank you for your super chat, BJ. It's Ree says, why do you read comments? Because it's enjoyable. Nia says, is water wet? Yeah. Muhammad says, how long have you been live? for 3 hours. Kevin says, have you ever been slapped in the face with a wet noodle because your girlfriend? No. Layla says hi. Hello, Layla. Alumni says hi. Hello, Alumni. Dunn says, do you believe sandwiches were/are common in Iran? Yes. Brad says, take a shot with me. Donald. Okay, here's my shot. Flower says hello. Hello, Flower. Astro says, did you know that we can all breathe? Yes. What do you mean? Says, when's your bedtime? I don't have one. X says, if your thought suddenly became audible to only you, would you listen more carefully? No, I would be very annoyed and trying to, forget that it was there. Ray says, that was a pretty weak shot, dude. Yeah, it was. McKinney says hello. Hello, McKinney. Dave M says, would you get buzzed off one shot of... I don't know, dude. Muhammad says, I've been on like 20 lives and haven't subscribed yet. Neither will I. Okay. Shapeshifting says, someone call the police. Can't you do it on your own? By the way, I'm looking at your profile picture and I don't know what that is. So McKinney says, keep up the work. Thank you. Jake says, do you remember me from your streams? Yes. Shapeshifting says, me neither. Okay. X says, if a coincidence repeats 3 times, does it stop being a coincidence? No. M says, white come. Okay. Muhammad says, is Don short for Donald or Christopher? Christopher, just kidding. Dave M says, are you a bot farmer? No. Alumni says, snort a line with me, Donald. I'm good. Dunn says, did you watch any of the Olympics? I did not. Lily says, hi. Hello, Lily. Spuzzy says, hi, how are you? I am good, Spuzzy. Serenity says, you play Roblox? I don't play that Predator game. Karen says, hi. Hello, Karen. Grant says, is it uncomfortable when you have your headphones on your hair? A little bit, to be honest. They don't fit completely on perfectly because of my hair. Karen says, my brother passed away last week. I'm sorry. Muhammad says, chat, isn't Dawn getting more cute with longer hair? Okay. M says, hi, daddy, a big BBC was just up my crack. Okay. Jake says, your headphones look donkey but sexy. Okay. Shapeshifting says, cute. Okay. Steep says, are you in the Epstein files? Not at all. Jose says, you play Fortnite sometimes. TT, super chatted $2 American. Thank you, TT. TT says, Ali is live. Raid? Donald, let's have some fun. That sounds interesting. Should I do that? I don't know. That's an interesting thing to request though. Thank you for your super chat. Rifty says, X, you need to stop breaking in our brains. Yeah, or continue. You do give hard questions, and I always feel bad when I can't answer them, but I enjoy reading them. Brad says, WTT, gotta love her. Yeah. IPVP says, fa. Okay. Astro says, did you know that if you don't eat food, you become hungry? I do. Spunky says, don't do it, Don. Dusty is weird. I kind of agree, but I appreciate, though, that they're pretty unique. I don't know says, is $10 is mod? Yes, for the rest of the stream. The Win says, hey Don, can you fart in a jar? No. Dunn says, one of my grandparents of my spouse passed yesterday, but that did not ruin today's sandwich. Okay. Chris super chatted 20 American dollars. Thank you, Chris. I greatly appreciate it. Chris says, "What's up, Don?" Hello, Chris. I'm about to end the stream in 7 minutes. I really appreciate your super chat, Chris. I wonder if I'll go scuba diving one day. I'm not like super like wanting to do it, but I see myself like doing it in maybe like a few years. Brad says, "W Chris, what would your thoughts be on YouTube allowing images and chats? That'd be pretty cool." Dave M says, "Ever drink breast milk?" Yes. Spunky says, "My brother is still alive but wants to remove his penis." Okay. TT says, "Gotta love those last minute super chats." Yeah. Thank you, Chris. The rich dive master. That's what I know him as. He's a dive master, a scuba diver who's making his own scuba diving company. Not Danny says, "If I stole candy from 73 babies, blah blah blah." Okay. Muhammad says, "Oh, this is Chris, the one you said you love his cock last live." Yeah, that's right. Astro says, "Did you know if you don't drink you get thirsty?" Yes. Steep says, "Super chatted 1 loony." Okay. Ray says, "Laughing emoji." Okay. TM says, "Can I have a shout out, please?" No. Brad says, "TT, honestly, I'd probably do whatever you want." Okay. X says, "When something breaks, is your first instinct to fix it, replace it, or ignore it?" Ignore it. Sand says, "Freak." Okay. By the way, my mind is on scuba diving now because of Chris, and right now I'm thinking about the danger of scuba diving. It kind of irks me quite a bit. Sharks, poisonous creatures, stonefish. It really deters me. Juju super chatted 1 American dollar. Thank you, Juju. That's a very like meaningless super chat. I'm not increasing the timer. There's no 30-hour goal. You didn't even write a message. I still appreciate it though. Thank you. Thank you a lot. Malin says, "What does argue mean? I would just simply..." What? David says, "What's your oral hygiene like?" Electric toothbrush, flossing every day. Tutu says Juju. Okay. Bob says, "Believe in God." Okay. Scat says, "What's your favorite NFL team?" Seahawks. Juju says, "Just did it to be funny." I see. Thank you. I mean, I didn't mean to downplay your super chat at all. Chris says, "The classes we teach is all about safety." Okay. Maybe I'll take it one day. Brad says, "What is your last possession that broke your center upset about?" What? By the way, Chris, like, isn't there like an infinite amount of poisonous creatures in the sea? Like, I feel like you'd have to memorize a lot of like. I feel like there's just so many poisonous creatures in the sea. I don't know if that's legit, but that just worries me like too much. Copro says, "Funny circus sunny junk." Okay. TM says, "Can you give me a shout out? I'll super 200. No. Grandma says, "What is your favorite book?" OAT. Well, I like the Sermon on the Mount. That's not exactly a book, but I like that piece of literature. The Wind says, "My dick is so hard right now." Okay. Dunn says, "Would you rather work at a sandwich shop making 75K a year or have to eat a sandwich for every day of your life?" sandwich every day of my life. Brad says, highly upset about. Can you type your whole message again? Spunky says, underwater cave diving looks terrifying. Yeah. Juju, wait a second. Juju says, I think sea urchins are cute. Yeah, they are. By the way, Chris, I just made you a mod. I was supposed to make you a mod a while ago, but I forgot to do that. I gotta stop slacking. I apologize. Dave M says, do you know blah blah blah? No comment. Dexo says, why do diver always fall back from the boat? What? X says, when you're bored, does your mind wander, invent, or observe? Wander. Brad says, what was your last possession that broke that you were highly upset about? I remember my phone broke. I went to a repair shop, got it repaired, and within a week it broke again. So that was bad. Spunky says, Don need a spankin'. Okay. My Sunshine says, what up from Dallas, Texas? Hello, Sunshine. Have a good day says, what is your favorite show of all time? Breaking Bad. Dexo says, why do divers always fall back? Because forward is the boat. I don't get it. I apologize. Steep says, go Redskins. Okay. TT says, same sunshine. Same sunshine. Okay. Lucas says, Kamala or Trump? No comment. Muhammad says, this will be the first time witnessing the live end. Never seen a Dawn outro. Okay. The Wind says, my dick is hard and big right now for you. Okay. M says, hi Dawn. Hello, M. Brad says, did they fix your phone again free of charge? They did not. I agreed to that though. Like, I didn't get a warranty or TT says raid. I don't feel like it. Copro says, is Breaking Bad underrated? No. TT says raid. I'm not sure how much I like Allie. Like, they're unique, I'll give them that, but their live streams, I wish they had more human in them, less AI, less robotic stuff. Fruit says, if you ever learn how to paint, what would you paint? I don't know, dude. Tyler says, super chat, that's the timer's locked. Steep says, go ice raids, no comment. Spunky says, good night, folks. Yeah, good night, everyone. Pen says, NNNA, okay. TT says, fine. I only say it because you always feel bad rating anyone else. Yeah, I do feel bad. I feel like I'm annoying them. Juju says, bye, chat. Bye, everyone. Bye, Juju. Thank you for your first super chat ever, Juju. Goodbye, everyone.